Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. Someone has been leaving me threatening notes, and I wish I never learned who it was. The first note was in a book. I picked up the book while I was browsing the library stack for resources to write a research report. The book was clearly misshelved, a pocket-sized journal someone had left tucked in with the actual library books. On its cover was written "Do not read," with the name scratched out below, which of course intrigued me enough to open it. It began, "In 2 weeks, I'm going to kill myself. I announced the class this morning," and you know how the class responded? Silence. I could see it in all their eyes. Scorn. I will always remember how none of them tried to stop me. Wow, this was raw, intense. I was both repulsed and unable to tear myself from the pages filled with the author's self-loathing. Halfway in, I stopped reading. It was so obviously personal, and the further I read, the more I felt as if eyes were on me. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled. That's when a little scrap of line paper fell out, the handwriting awkward, clumsy, the point of the pencil pressed hard on the paper. It read, "I hate you." I quickly looked around to see if anyone had noticed, picked up the paper, and stuck it back in the book. It seems weird, but I almost felt as if someone had left the diary on purpose and was waiting to see who would pick it up and read it. I put it on the shelf and left, thinking nothing further about it. But that feeling, like someone hovering nearby, persisted. The next day in class, I was shocked to find the diary nestled in my bag along with my textbooks. In my periphery, I thought I glimpsed a girl in a black dress, but when I glanced up, I saw no one. Toward the end of class, when I reached into my pocket for my phone, I felt a rustle. Someone had tucked a note into my pocket and written in chunky strokes, "You deserve to die." I lifted my eyes to scan the classroom. A computer lab with scattering of heads bent to glowing screens. No sign of the girl in black. I crumpled the note and tossed it away. Later, I took the diary back to the library, intending to stick it right back on the shelf. Curiosity got the better of me on the way, and I read a bit further. It was all kind of teen drama stuff. Girl meets boy. Boy falls for popular girl. Girl feels rejected, and on top of it all gets bullied and ostracized for being a weirdo. In her classes, girl summons demon. Yeah, the last few pages got pretty out there. It seemed to have turned a corner from angsty journal to whatever this was. The grinning version of me in the mirror had pointed teeth and hollows where its eyes should be. I asked if it was here to drag me to hell. My wicked reflection asked me if that mattered. I thought of all the people who wronged me, the people who saw me drowning and did nothing, and I stared into my own reflection's hollow eyes and said that I would destroy everyone. The girls who scorned me, the boy who broke my heart, and most of all the people with pity in their eyes who looked at me like I was a sad clown on the sidelines of their own self-important lives. I will give the world one last chance. Until October 5th. That's when I will end everything. I checked the calendar. October 5th was in 2 weeks. That meant I had 2 weeks in which to confront this diary's author and convince her not to succumb to her inner demons, I guess? Or at least not to do anything drastic that might harm herself or others. Since I was still pretty sure she was following me, I wrote a note on a sheet of paper and slipped it between the pages. "Please don't hurt anybody, and certainly not yourself. How can I help you?" Then I slid the book back onto the shelf. The lecture hall was mostly empty the next morning in class, sunbeams illuminating the dust. Students trickled in, slouched under backpacks and coats. Overhead, the projector whirred. I was distracted, trying to cram the answer for a pop quiz I was sure was coming. And then I felt it again, that sensation of being watched. My eyes drifted to my notebook and caught on the uneven scrawl of capital letters. "Cut yourself out of the world." I craned my neck to glance at the seats nearest me and over my shoulder behind me, but most of the classroom was empty except for me. I rubbed at the goosebumps on my arms, turned and slowly scanned the back row, wondering, was the author of that diary here? Was she angry I'd put it back? What was this? A test? A prank? The notes persisted over the next few days, and every so often I'd catch a glimpse of a figure just in the corner of my eye, a girl in a black dress. I had so many notes, I started keeping them in a Ziploc bag. Kill yourself. You suck. You shouldn't be alive. How dare you breathe? The world doesn't want you in it. Die, 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 die. One time, I almost caught her. I was sitting on a bench sipping coffee. It might have been only the wind that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. There came a flicker of motion in my periphery. A waifish girl all in black had her hand on my arm. But I was so startled, I lost my balance and tumbled backward off the bench. When I got to my feet, she was already gone. Recently, the threats escalated from notes to, well, attempted murder? I don't know how to classify it. What I do know is that when I took a sip from my thermos, I immediately spat out. It tasted like, well, I don't know. It tasted off. Something had been mixed in with it. And I'm pretty sure it was some kind of chemical. It seemed too obvious to be a real attempt to harm me. More of a warning? A cry for attention? I dumped it out rather than taking it to the campus police. I was fairly certain that if this person stalking me was in some sort of crisis, our campus police were the last people who were likely to be effective help for her. I went back to the library and found the diary, still on the shelf where I'd left it, and as I picked it up from the shelf and opened it, ostentatiously reading where anyone could see me, I felt it again, the sense of someone hovering near, watching. As soon as I got that feeling, I deliberately tucked the diary into my bag and said loudly, "I'm here to help. Let me know how." Several students and a librarian at the reference desk looked up at me, and I blushed, but I just ignored them and walked out, taking the book with me. I received an answer in the dead of night. The campus neighborhood I live in is usually pretty safe, and sometimes I crack my windows at night. I woke up out of a deep sleep with the feel of cold steel at my throat. For several seconds, I lay tangled under my sheets, hard hammering, unable to open my eyes. I have night terrors sometimes where I can't move. That was happening now. It was several seconds before I was finally able to sit up. Something heavy and metallic clattered to the floor, and a breeze wafted from the open window. Looking on my floor, I saw a knife, and on the top page of the notebook that lay on my nightstand was a fresh warning. The only salvation is death. The campus police told me to lock my windows and my door at night, and took my description of the waifish goth girl. They also asked about the diary, but I lied that I didn't have it with me. I felt certain if I handed it over I'd never see it again, and would lose my last chance to, I don't know, help its writer? I didn't want to think of her as a sad clown on the sidelines of my life. I wanted to extend a hand, or something, to do more than everyone else who'd let her down, even if that put myself at risk. Maybe my savior mentality was why she targeted me. I've been thinking about how she left her diary on the bookshelf for anyone to pick up, and I suspect, based on her ravings about how ugly the world is, that she planted her diary in a public place so that it would be read. She wanted someone to lash out at, someone who violated her privacy by reading her journal, but also pouring chemicals into my thermos, breaking into my apartment. These struck me more as cries for attention than as serious attempts to hurt me. Like, look at me, look at my pain. And I felt more sorry for my stalker than fearful of her, even when the notes escalated in tone. Cut yourself from the world. Soon, soon. And hysterical warnings about the deadline. October 5th is the end. 11 days. 10 days. I just didn't have faith the campus police would handle any of this sensitively. So with 10 days left, I took the journal back to the library and asked the woman at the reference desk if she'd seen anybody tuck this onto bookshelves or had any idea who it might belong to. I showed her the notes and explained that I was being threatened and needed to find out by whom. The librarian took one look at the notes and said, "The person who wrote this diary and the person who wrote the notes are probably not the same person." I frowned. "Why do you say that?" The handwriting is different. She was right, and I felt such a fool for not noticing sooner. The diary was in ballpoint pen, but the notes were in gel pen, Sharpie, on all different kinds of paper, and written in wobbly block capitals. Okay, but I still need to know who she is, I said. I'm running out of time before she... Well, she doesn't say it explicitly, but I think October 5th she's going to kill herself. I opened the diary to some of the last pages, where it was less coherent and mostly dark squiggles and gibberish. I showed the librarian some of the lines that read, I'll show them how they have hurt me, they'll see the pain spill out of me flowing crimson, and it will stain them, the stain will spread. Yeah, these are pretty alarming writings. The librarian flipped through, and then squinted at the scribbled out name on the cover. I'd already held it up to the light and tried to parse it, but only the first letters, A and W, were legible. Anna? Anne? Let me search the campus directory, she said. I thanked her and sat down at one of the tables to peruse the notes again, wondering if the diary author hadn't written them. Who did? A few moments later the librarian called. Found her. Her name is Ava W. Do you have a way to contact her? I leapt up. No, unfortunately. Why? Is it restricted in form? Because Ava W. died 10 years ago on October 5th. 10 years ago, the librarian showed me an obituary. In the image was a solemn girl dressed in a black gown, staring into the camera like she wanted to drag down the entire world. But if she's dead, why would someone else leave this diary for me and write all these notes? I wondered. This wasn't how I expected all this to end. I figured, of course, that it was possible the diary's author wrote it a long time ago. October 5th could have been in any year, and the diary itself was, well, it was worn, but I didn't want it to be true. I'd hoped. She didn't want to kill herself. I said, more to myself than the librarian. She wanted someone to care enough to stop her. This was hitting me hard. I stared at the hollow eyes of the girl in the obituary. 10 years ago, Ava W. carried out her threats. If I'm being honest, part of the reason I didn't try harder to look up the name, to find out who she is, was that I didn't want to know. Not if it was this. I'm sorry, the librarian told me as I took the diary back. I retreated to my table, looked again at that first page. I will always remember how none of them tried to stop me. I like to believe I would have tried, that if I'd met Ava then, if I'd been witness to her despair, I have tried to pull her out of it, even at risk of being pulled under, but there was no saving Ava. And as for the notes, I felt like I was back at square one. I had no clue who was writing them. I suppose my best guess was someone who shared classes with me, given that's where they tended to show up the most. Idly scrolling the class rosters, I shook my head. None of these were people I could imagine wishing death to me. And who was the girl I kept glimpsing out corner of my eye, flitting through my periphery? A ghost? But I don't really believe in ghosts. Goosebumps blossomed along my arms, and I stiffened at the returning sense of being watched. Hey, said the librarian. I craned my neck, wondering where the feeling of eyes was coming from. Hey! I glanced up, because the librarian was now looming over me, brow scrunched. What? I asked. What are you writing? Surprised, I glanced at my hand. I was holding a pen. Pressed hard into the paper under the tip were words in block capitals. I stared, just stared, and the first thought that popped into my head was, did the librarian do it? But no, it was my hand holding the pen. And yet, I had no memory of writing these words. None at all. But there they were. Cut yourself out of the W.O. The rest of the last word, the O, was partially drawn, my pen mid-circle. Apparently, I've been writing the notes to myself. The librarian was staring at me like I was some sort of lunatic. But I didn't even pay attention to her as I dumped out all my books and notebooks. I flipped through pages in a ferocious flurry until I found a textbook with a margin torn off the table of contents. I pawed through the ziploc of notes until I found one written on a torn scrap of a contents page. I held it to the textbook margins tier. It fit perfectly. All the notes were ones that had been written on things near at hand to me, with whatever implement happened to be in reach at the time. And now that I was realizing where each note had been written, I found that I remembered, but it was all so hazy, like when you can't find your keys, only discover them in your pocket, or worse, in your hand, where you've been carrying them but have forgotten you're holding them. It was like that. "Is this some kind of joke?" asked the librarian. I didn't stay to explain, just packed everything up, fled because now that I caught my hand in the act, now that the memories were starting to come loose, I realized that it must have been my own hand that slipped the diary into my bag. My own hand that snatched a kitchen knife before I went to bed and held it to my throat while I was sleeping. And my own hand, too, that poured turpentine into my thermos while I was doing some art. How do I tell police that I poured turpentine into my own thermos and held a knife to my own throat? I've read her diary cover to cover, and it makes me sadder every time. I wanted to try to save her. I wanted her to know that someone cared enough to try to save her. But I also can't allow her to harm anyone else. Who knows how many she's taken in the years before I found her journal. I can see her now. I see her at my periphery in that black gown. I get those goosebumps all up my arms when she takes my hand. The notes are in capital letters because capitals are easier to write with someone else's hand. She's been writing the notes through me, guiding my hand across the page. She doesn't even hide from me anymore, but no one else can see her. I've burned the diary, destroyed it, so no one else will ever read it. But she already has a grip on me. She hasn't let go of my wrist since I burned the book. And I know I can't save myself because I know what she will make this hand of mine do. I've begged, I've pleaded, but no matter what I write, she replies, "IT was too late for me. It's too late for you. You saw me drowning. You kept reading. October 5th. October 5th. October 5th. Story 2. My husband died 3 years ago, but his shadow still appears in my house. I hate using the word widow, but that's what I am. I've been that for 3 years now, ever since my husband died from a liver infection caused by chronic hepatitis. We never had kids, and it hasn't been easy to get used to an empty house. I try to fill my time with work and volunteering at church. I haven't moved on yet, but I'm trying one step at a time. Strange things started happening to me about a month ago. It began one night when I woke up suddenly in the middle of the night to the sound of the curtains moving and decided to grab a glass of water. When I opened the fridge, its light cast 2 clear shadows on the floor. I let out a scream and dropped the glass. There was nobody behind me or anywhere in the house. I searched every room, terrified it might be an intruder. I convinced myself I'd imagined it and went back to bed. But the next night, the same strange waking happened. I got up to use the bathroom, and when I flipped the ceiling light on, 2 shadows appeared on the floor again. It was obvious nobody was there, so I just stood there confused, trying to figure out if it was some weird trick of the light. Then I noticed the outline of the other shadow. It was a man. Not only that, but the build and the hair were exactly like my husband's. I must have stared at that shadow for minutes, stunned, until it moved on its own like it had a life of its own. It took a few steps toward me, raised a hand like it was telling me to come closer, and then vanished. The next day after service, I went out for coffee with Adam and told him what had happened. Adam was a divorced man my age who also volunteered at the church. We'd become friends. "Maybe he just wants to know if you're okay," he said, sounding skeptical. "I don't think that's it," I said, not wanting to explain why. "Then maybe try talking back," he shrugged. "You might find out what he wants." Adam looked uncomfortable with the whole conversation, even more so because it was obvious he liked me. I'll admit I liked him too, but I was afraid to get close to anyone after my husband. Still, I tried his idea. On the nights it happened again, every couple of days, I spoke to the shadow like I was speaking to my late husband. If it understood me, it didn't care. The gesture stayed the same, and even got sharper and more aggressive as the days went on. Always the same hand motioning for me to come closer. But come where? Things really escalated one night when I didn't wake up naturally. I woke up choking in darkness. Something was pressing hard against my face, and I couldn't breathe. I thrashed on the bed, my lungs burning, and managed to fall off and break free. It was my pillow that had been over my head, but there was nobody in the room. I ran to switch on the light and saw the man's shadow next to the bed. Its face stretched like it was smiling. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I left the house and wandered until dawn. I just couldn't stay there. I went to work, but left early. My mind stuck on what had happened. I called Adam, and we met at the same cafe where I told him everything. "There's something off about this," he said, thinking. "Why would your husband want to hurt you? You didn't know him, Adam." I answered, tears streaming. "He's not the kind of man who'd want me happy without him." Then I told him everything I'd never told anyone. How I'd met my husband when I was 17, and he used my innocence to trap me in that house. How jealous, obsessive, and possessive he was. He'll never leave me alone. I finished, stunned at how much I'd said. Adam's expression shifted from doubt to pity. I don't know if he believed the crazy story about shadows, but he invited me to stay at his place in the guest room. I hesitated, but agreed. My closest family lived 300 miles away, and there was no way I was sleeping in my house. He was very kind and respectful. We ordered Chinese and watched a movie on opposite ends of the couch. I wondered if this was what normal couples were like. Later I said goodnight and went straight to my room where exhaustion hit me, and I practically passed out on the bed. I only woke up again in the middle of the night to a sharp noise, like something falling. Terrified, I stepped into Adam's hallway, but didn't find him in the living room. I noticed his bedroom door was half open and the light was on. I called his name, but got no answer. So I pushed the door and saw the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. Adam's pale body was hanging in the air, stiff, his legs twitching. His neck was tied to the curtain, twisted into a rope like a noose. And beside him, my husband's shadow was cast on the wall, making that same gesture with his hand. I rushed to cut the rope, but it was too late. So I called 911, grabbed my things, and left the house right then. I caught the first bus to my mother's, and that's where I am now. Mom was happy to see me, but confused by the terror on my face. 2 days have passed, and I've barely eaten a thing. She must be wondering why I can't find any words to explain what happened, and especially why every night I refuse to turn on any light in the house. Story 3. The Night Guard. Back when I was studying abroad in Beijing at the turn of the century, 25 years ago, but that doesn't sound quite as dramatic, my friends and I went camping on the Great Wall. We wanted a bit of adventure before the semester ended, and we'd exhausted every corner of campus in Haitian. So we decided to take a taxi out to hike up to the unrestored portion of Mushianyu, bring along some packaged food and plenty of alcohol, and spend the night drinking under the stars. Once we finished a treacherous hike up to the wall, which involved falling portions of stone that nearly crushed our femurs, mountainside slippery with slimy moss and liquefied caterpillar bodies, and repeatedly losing our way from the nearly vertical trail marked with nothing but water bottles and plastic bags tied to branches. We threw all of our stuff into a semi-sturdy watchtower and tore into our food. My friend Sun turned to me in between bites of beef jerky. "Do you know the history of the guard towers we're sleeping in?" I was the only foreigner in the group, and he knew very well I didn't hold a candle to his knowledge of Chinese anthropology or history. I looked forward to his explanation, and I shook my head, indicating my ignorance. All I know is they were used to send smoke signals to each other to let the other guards know of approaching invaders. Sun nodded. "Yep, but that's while the guards were alive. What do you think happened once they died?" Our group paused, caught off guard by Sun's escape from pragmatism. He was never one to indulge in deviations from logic. He was a robotics engineer who racked up first-place trophies from competitions in 7 different countries before he turned 15. The only reason I'd even crossed paths with him is because I'd gotten lost trying to find the bathroom in the engineering library during orientation week, and he'd given me both directions and pity in the form of a lunch invite where we bonded over our love of Yangmei juice and hiking. "Let me guess, their bodies were used as human shields?" asked Wen Jun, another pragmatist, albeit of a more cynical bent. "I mean, yeah, probably, but let me tell you about one in particular," Sun said, taking a swig of gasoline-scented baijiu and kicking off our festivities of the night in earnest. My favorite one, legendary man, Commander Li Ming. He was one of the most prized fighters stationed on the Great Wall, and there are ancient manuscripts detailing how he seemed superhuman in his ability to need so little sleep or nourishment. He kept watch day in and day out when he wasn't actively fighting or training or commanding his troops. His robotic persistence has been an inspiration of mine for most of my life. Actually, we all chuckled at that. Of course, Sun's idol wasn't drawn from something as banal as pop culture. He'd somehow found a way to be deep and thoughtful even as a child. I admired the way that the things other people spent a lifetime learning how to do came naturally to him. Anyway, as is the inevitable end of the warrior who fights one battle too many, he was shot down in combat. His final words, as recorded by the army scribe, were that he would never stop protecting his troops. One more swig of shiver-inducingly strong alcohol later, Sun continued. That night, the invaders overran the portion of the wall he watched over. Troop morale was already down due to Li Ming's death, and after they were captured, things spiraled further. The scribe was, according to his own account, chained to a wall but allowed to record the goings-on so that posterity could remember how brutally the Mongols crushed us. Sun accentuated this phrase with air quotes. The scribe recounted how he was counting down the hours until his own tortuous death, and how difficult it was to concentrate while hearing the wails of his countrymen as they were beaten and tossed over the sides of the wall. He bemoaned the loss of their fearless leader Li Ming, and heard many of his friends crying out for Ming's watchful eye to guard over their surviving comrades before they were silenced. Eventually, a dark night fell as quickly as his comrades had. The camp echoed with drips of blood against stone and the chirp of crickets, an assault on the scribe's senses that kept him awake and writing against his will, almost as if he was possessed. He wondered if this was the way Li Ming felt, and why he was so tireless. Despite the exhaustion, he just couldn't bring himself to sleep. As it turns out, that was for the better, because he began to hear a repeated tick-scrape, tick-scrape, tick-scrape. Goosebumps traveled across my arms. No baijiu needed. Night was beginning to fall on our world, too, and back then we had no cell phones. Wherever we were just there, alone. Kids these days will never know the same flavor of isolation we did. That much is evident in their willingness to bring it upon themselves with their screen-lit jails. At first, Sun continued, he thought it was the sound of the branches in the wind beating against the guard tower, but the noise grew closer, and it sounded too sharp to be a branch. It was almost like a cat's nails, tapping as it landed on a hard surface, then scratching briefly as it dug in prepare for its next jump. Sun paused briefly. At this point, we were entranced, and had unintentionally huddled close together across from him, listening as if to a lecture. You can take the students out of the campus, but not the campus out of the students, I guess. The next part of the scribe's account includes some ancient Chinese that is a bit difficult to translate. Please have patience with me if the adjectives sound a bit nonsense. It's hard to find a direct modern equivalent for these words. We all nodded eagerly for him to continue. Don't worry, Sun. I can help you translate. When June piped up, all right, so the scribe heard the noise getting closer and closer. Since he was chained to the wall, he couldn't stand up to reach the window to look outside, nor could he crawl around the corner to look through the doorway of the watchtower without waking up the Mongol guards from the noise of his chains. He just waited as the noise got louder, closer, and Sun paused, consulted with Wen Jun for a moment, and more foreboding. Something about this noise was creating a dread within him, twisting his stomach into knots and cramping his muscles. Soon, he wrote that the noise began to be accompanied by a deep rasping, something that almost sounded like a cross between a gasp and a burp, but with the rhythm of slow breath. That made it 10 times worse. He held his own breath and waited as the noise made it all the way into the watchtower, right onto the other side of the wall he was chained to. One of the Mongol guards woke up and let out a brief cry, only about a split second before it was interrupted by a muffled cracking noise. It sounded almost like, Sun thought for a moment about his next words, like a walnut cracked under a handkerchief. When Jun Xiaowei, our fourth and only female friend, You know what they say about the goods being odd, but the odds being good for women in an engineering college. And I burst out laughing, dispelling the creeping uneasiness that had settled over our group as a result of Sun's tale. Is that seriously what the scribe wrote with his precious ink and paper? I asked between peals of laughter. Come on, man. I told you the ancient words are hard to translate. Okay, continue. I want to play the counting game after you're done. Xiaowei shouted. I'd almost forgotten we'd come out here for a night of drinking and celebrating the end of the semester. Sun continued obediently. The stars in the sky echoed in his eyes as he looked at her. So the thing making the noise edged around the watchtower, making more muffled cracking noises as it went. As it rounded the corner, the scribe stopped writing. Something in him told him to stay as quiet as possible. What he wrote after the thing left. And we are fortunate to have this account thanks to his bravery. The thing came into view. It was a human skeleton, crawling on all fours with two cloudy moons for eyes. The tick scrape came as its elbows and knees hit the ground, and it dragged itself forward. It was not naked, though. It was wearing Commander Li Ming's uniform. When the scribe saw that, he gasped, attracting its attention. The skeleton dragged itself towards him, painting calligraphy with its bones in the pools of blood on the watchtower floor. The scribe began to cry, assured of his horrible end. His neck would be snapped like the Mongols surrounding him. Chun, rasped the skeleton. At that moment, the scribe knew this had to be Li Ming. Li Ming, what has happened to you? I promised I would always protect my troops. I'll never give up on my watch. You can count on me. The scribe was at a loss for words. He watched as skeleton Li Ming dug into one of the corpses by its side and yanked out an arm bone, sharpening one of its ends on the stone floor. More scraping, more red seas on the floor parted, but rushing back to fill in the gap. The scribe watched with a mix of horror and gratitude as the skeleton Li Ming approached his chains and picked their locks with the sharpened bone, freeing him. I won't let history forget you. I will write about you. Thank you, Commander. I don't know how to repay you. Get back safely and deliver your story, so that reinforcements can come. I can't kill all the invaders by sunrise, and my countrymen need help. Yes, Commander. The scribe gathered his materials and carefully wrapped them in his shirt, which he placed into a Mongol's pack. He stole the clothes from a Mongol corpse and made his way down the mountain untroubled, bringing this story to the local townsfolk, who were able to alert the army to send reinforcements to the Great Wall. While nobody believed the scribe about the skeleton and figured it must have been a hallucination resulting from lack of food and water, and a sympathetic Mongol must have really freed him, they let him publish the story as he had written it. And no one could explain, once the reinforcements were sent, what had broken the necks of the Mongols in that watchtower. There wasn't a single mark on the outside of their bodies, but their heads hung limply on their shoulders, facing the wrong way. Xiaowei's nails were digging into my arm, and Wen Jun was slack-jawed. Sun, what the fuck, dude? I said, zipping up my hoodie and stuffing my arms into it. Who knew you had this in you? Sun grinned. We couldn't come camping without a good ghost story. You're always going on about how that's a tradition in America. All right, fair. You got me. But now, can we get to the drinking games? That was so scary, and I just want to party with you guys one last time before I have to go back home. The next few hours was a trial by fire masterclass in Chinese drinking culture. I wish I could recall what we played or what the games were called, but none of that left an impact on me the way Sun's story still does all these years later. Eventually, there came a point in the night when the burn of the alcohol calmed into embers, and we found ourselves exhausted but content. We set up our sleeping bags by flashlight in the dark watchtower we had chosen to set up camp in, the breeze keeping the air inside from getting too stale. I can't go to bed without brushing my teeth. Will someone come with me to the bathroom? Xiaowei asked, just as we'd all gotten comfortable. Of course. Sun and Wen Jun were already snoring away, or at least pretending to so they wouldn't have to get up. I'll go with you. I relented. I guess I could use a real bathroom. We exited the watchtower onto the wall and walked down a few flights of steep stairs until we hit a flat portion of the wall that met a properly paved trail, lined on both sides with dense foliage. The path was more than a little creepy. Sun's story seemed to have wormed its way into both of our heads, as we instinctively edged closer until we were walking practically arm in arm to the bathroom. Thankfully, it wasn't much further down the path. The bathroom consisted of 3 adjoining wooden booths raised a few feet off the ground on a wooden platform, each marked with an LED light indicating whether they were vacant or not. One of the lights was green, one red, and one apparently not working. "You go first," I insisted. Xiaowei took me up on the offer, stepping into the middle booth under the green light and shutting the door. I reached over to the booth that wasn't lit up and tried to handle, or at least tried to. The knob was missing. I leaned down and shined my flashlight into the hole where it should have been, forgetting all manner of decency and privacy in my drunken state. Instead of finding a bathroom, I was shocked to see a man in some sort of police uniform, sitting on a folded metal chair. He was turned facing the wall of the booth away from me, but when my light shined on him, he slowly began to turn around. Something about the movement made me really uneasy, and I jumped back and switched off my flashlight just as the door to the third booth opened up. The man who stepped out of that booth gave me a friendly smile before taking out his own flashlight and ambling down the path. I was so grateful to see another human being at that moment that I didn't even stop to ask him what he was doing out here. I just jumped in the booth and slammed the door closed. I waited till my rapid breathing leveled out, used the bathroom, and cracked the door open the tiniest bit to survey my surroundings before stepping back into the open. Xiaowei was waiting outside, water bottle and toothbrush in one hand and flashlight in the other, foot tapping impatiently. The sight of her gave me the courage to step out. "Xiaowei, you have to see this," I whispered, pointing to the first booth. "What?" "There's a man in that room, and it's not a bathroom. He's in a uniform, and he's just sitting there," I whispered urgently. I shined my flashlight in there to see if the booth was open, and I saw him. Xiaowei looked at the booth and back to me, nervously. "Okay, I'll look, but I don't want to use the flashlight. I'll just peer in. Watch my back," she whispered back. I nodded. She walked straight up to the knob hole and put her eye to it, then immediately recoiled. She walked back to me and whispered, "What are you talking about?" "I can't see anything. There's a knob there." Bewildered, I went up the knob hole myself, and sure enough, there was a glassy white knob where there had previously been a viewing point. It had been crookedly stuffed into the wooden opening and wasn't a perfect fit, so I figured the guy had just placed it there to prevent further snooping. A part of me was grateful not to have to see him and endure that gut-wrenching anxiety again. I shrugged, walked back to Xiaowei, and we made our way back to camp where we collapsed next to the others until the sun woke us up. "Ugh, that stone floor did me no favors," Sun complained, rubbing his head as he rose. "So lumpy." The rest of us grunted in agreement. Too young to be plagued by hangovers just yet, but still in discomfort from a lack of adequate sleep and bedding. We collected our trash and packed up our stuff, agreeing to skip the hike and pay the entrance fee to take the tourist path back home. While we did so, I told Sun and Wenjun about the man in the uniform I'd seen in the bathroom booth. Xiaowei shrugged, only agreeing to corroborate the part of the story where we'd seen the glassy white knob together. I didn't blame her for being skeptical of my side of the tale. As I finished up my story and we started down the flights of stairs, we ran into the man I'd seen in the bathroom booth yesterday. "Good morning." I greeted him in my best Mandarin. "Thank you for giving me your bathroom yesterday. I really had to go, and the first booth was taken by a man in a uniform." He stopped dead in his tracks, his smile inverting to a scowl and his face turning as red as my favorite Yangmei. He began yelling at me and pointing, finally spitting in my face. My Mandarin was not nearly good enough to keep up with his regional accent or his speed of speech, but naturally my first thought was that I'd spoken the wrong words and offended him somehow. I wiped the spit out of my eyes and shouted, "I'm sorry," after him as he literally ran away from our group, then turned to my friends to help me translate what he'd said. Sun handed me a napkin, his hand trembling. I noticed Xiaowei and Wenjun staring at him with expressions of dread. "What? Sun, what did he say?" I cried, the pit in my stomach growing deeper. Xiaowei collapsed her haunches, downing an entire bottle of water. Wenjun wouldn't stop shaking his head. Sun gulped. He said. He trailed off, took a deep breath. He said that first booth is reserved for the night guard. He's the ghost of a watchman who used to work at the watchtower we just stayed in, and that you should never, ever look into that booth or talk about him, or you'll curse yourself and everyone you tell the story to. Son, you said Commander Li Ming's eyes were like two cloudy moons. That's exactly what the knob looked like. A glassy, white moon. I was looking him right in the eye. The realization was enough to make me vomit. We all wondered how much worse our neck pain would be the following night, or if we'd even survive it. Story 4. I study at a really old university hospital. One night, I overslept and discovered its darkest secret. It's dark and raining outside. I'm typing all this inside a car, hoping that nobody will notice me, praying that this is a safe hiding spot at least for this moment, at least until I let everything that happened off my chest. I need at least one other person to know before it's too late. To give you a backgrounder, I'm a second-year med school student at possibly my country's oldest university, definitely one of the oldest universities in Asia. I won't give any names to protect the innocent, but it goes without saying that my campus is haunted. Forget the prestige, or the fact that literal national heroes studied in this university. Mention its name to anyone in the country, and they'll ask if you've ever seen a ghost. I prided myself as a woman of science. I've had countless night classes and 8 p.m. dismissals even in pre-med. I never saw a ghost, not once. What I did see, however, is something worse. Something no one should ever see or have to go through. It shouldn't have to exist, period. Even if an evil few disagree and say that it's for the greater good. So I went on with my life, made friends and had a few boyfriends, loved some teachers and hated a few, and dreamed of becoming a successful orthopedic doctor in the near future, although my parents wanted me to take pediatrics or obstetrics instead. Med school was a ton of pressure and highly competitive, with fewer and fewer students returning each term. But what was new, except for that one night class when we all entered the lecture hall to find an unfamiliar prof waiting for us on the platform. I'll never forget the look on his face, unnaturally pale and pasty, a smile as wide and forced as a clown's. Mr. Romero is undergoing investigation by the university's authorities, he explained between his teeth, still smiling. In the meantime, I'll handle this class. My friends and I glanced at each other, a little unnerved, but at this point we just wanted to get it over with and return to our dorms. In particular, I was so exhausted that I didn't get to recite much that day. I was also pretty bummed because I liked Mr. Romero and his way of teaching, even if he had a tendency to question the university's archaic religious policies, or its current stances on politics, or the ongoing corruption within the admin. In lectures, Mr. Romero had the tendency to go off topic. Whenever he caught himself, he always said the same thing. Everything is connected. Then he'd go back to his lecture on nerves and tissues. Still, as upset as some were with the substitute arrangement, we weren't really surprised about it. We just hoped that Mr. Romero wouldn't get fired. Other professors who asked too much ended up getting called by the admin. A few students were victims of this as well, and they'd never show up to class or lab again, presumably expelled. And so for the longest time, I thought I wouldn't see Mr. Romero again, until tonight. My friends and I were on our way back to our dorms after class when I realized that I had left my canvas bag under the desk at the lecture hall. "You can get tomorrow, Rafaela," my dorm mate always said. "Besides, it's been raining hard lately. You don't want to get caught in the rain." I considered for a moment. It was typhoon season after all. We had just passed by the main building of our campus, which was just a road away from the med building. A little lore on this building. It's really old. It has gargoyles and statues carved on the roofs and walls, and for some reason, no one knows why. Its top floor is sealed off to public. No classes are held there. All stairs leading to that floor are blocked off. Even the elevators don't have a button to prevent people from going there. Just floors 1 to 3. We're not yet far off, I told my friends. "I'll catch up. You guys go ahead." Thunder rumbled and brought with it fine droplets of rain. I groaned. I really wanted to get my canvas bag because my umbrella was in there, and I didn't want to waste my money on another umbrella that would get lost, forgotten, or stolen again in the future. Also, it was almost 9, and the janitors would be cleaning the lecture halls anytime soon. "I'll follow you," Nathan said. Olive smiled knowingly, and the others began teasing him. Even though I knew Nathan had a crush on me, I saw him as nothing more than a friend. I hurried to med school building before he could follow, and before the rain worsened. By the time I found my canvas bag, the building was almost empty, and the lights of other classrooms in the hallway were going off one by one. The last classes were getting dismissed. The rain outside worsened as well, all of a sudden, sending torrent of downpour that I knew would flood the lower-lying levels of the campus. I groaned, realizing that I had chosen the worst pair of black flats to navigate that possible situation, but it had been sunny in the morning. Never mind, I thought to myself, settling on my seat in the lecture hall. It was so eerie to be alone, but I didn't believe in ghosts, and I knew that it would be much worse outside. Maybe I could use a bit of rest. I yawned and folded my arms on the table and slept, setting my alarm to 20 minutes. I didn't know then that I was being watched, that there were footsteps in the hallway, and that the whispers I soon heard came from people who had just entered the room. For all I knew, these were just part of a dream. Then the alarm sounded, and I woke up to a dark room that smelled like rotten meat, or worse. I've handled cadavers in med school. I thought I was used to the smell of death. But this wasn't just death. It smelled like something or someone was actively dying, decaying. And in the darkness, all around me were cries and moans of pain. I scrambled to my feet. I tried to stay calm. I knew that I was no longer in the lecture room. For some reason, I was still holding my phone. I turned on my flashlight and saw myself in a dark hallway. One wall was made up of windows half hidden by thick railing. I peered outside and had to blink twice. I wondered if I was still dreaming. The windows overlooked 4 stories below, to a courtyard garden, that of the main building. Then I heard rattling. 3 knocks coming from a door. A rescue? Deep voices, including the substitutes. If it works, at the very least, some part of her will be here. Another voice, a female, someone I couldn't recognize. And if it doesn't, then she'll end up like Romero. Footsteps and flashlights, lines of light that fell upon walls and reveal horrors that almost made me scream out loud. But that would give me away. I hid behind an empty bookshelf, hoping to blend in the shadows as the 2 teachers inspected the room. But not before I captured evidence against them. Shielding me from view on the other side was a torso. Yes, a torso. The rest of the body blended in the wall. As the flashlights danced around the hallway, I caught more body parts. An arm jutting out of the floor, a hand swaying in painful, jerking motions. Legs and feet with missing toes embedded between the wall and floor. Shapes of faces under paint, their expressions filled with agony. Still with my phone in hand, I hid behind the half-bodies and other obstacles. A chair here and there, other bookshelves, some nearly broken tables, and followed closely behind as the 2 paced the room. Trust me, I caught everything on video. The body parts still jerking and moving, attached to the ceiling, walls, floor. The sound of eternal torture. People forever stuck between life and death. And then snippets of answers. My substitute professor and his colleague were apparently using the bodies as subversives, and patients who had no family to miss them as test subjects for experiments on teleportation. But I can't tell if this new arm over here is hers. It's her skin tone. Something tells me it's not her. If it's not her, we've succeeded at last. I stayed long enough until I saw what I needed to see. I used a flash in my cell phone camera, knowing fully well that I was finally blowing my cover. But that was Mr. Romero's head sticking out of the wall, offering me a small, sad smile and a word of advice that I was going to take regardless. Run. I dashed down the hallway. The professors, more familiar with the terrain, sprinted after me, or tried to. Some of the arms yanked their feet, and they had to struggle to break free. The man broke free first, but tripped over another leg while another half-body jutting from the nearby wall reached out to pull his hair until he fell backwards. Meanwhile, I was getting closer and closer to the door, wondering how on earth I was getting out of the building if every entry point to the 4th floor was sealed off. Turns out I didn't have to worry. I opened the door, and in the blink of an eye, I was at the lobby of my dorm. Nobody else was there. It was late, but the lights were still on, and in a moment, the security guard came out and greeted me with a smile. "It's quite late, Rafaela, but you're dry. Thank God. I'm glad you didn't get caught in the rain." Thunder rumbled outside. The wind and rain howled. I ran up to my room, charged my phone, and checked if everything was there. Nothing but 10 minutes of blank, mute nothingness. And the picture I took of Mr. Romero? One long black rectangle that didn't show anything even when I changed its brightness in an app. I knew I couldn't go back to school. I closed my eyes, and when I opened it in a second, I found myself in my car, which was in the parking lot across the hospital. Their experiment on teleportation worked for the very first time. It seemed, with me, I am slowly learning to navigate this power. All I had to do was close my mind and will myself to be in a different place. I must admit that it was an amazing power to have, something I could also use in bringing the truth to light. But at what cost? At what cost? Story 5. Booze and hot pockets at the end of the world. So, it's been a few days now and I've noticed some strange things. I mean, apart from the actual fucking rapture happening, leaving me, as far as I can tell, the last man on Earth. Well, the last sane man on Earth. I think I'm sane anyway. Admittedly, I did spend the first, let's say roughly 36 hours, in a drunken haze. I remember going through cycles of crying myself to sleep and laughing at my predicament until I passed out. Needless to say, I was not in the best state of mind. But then what would you do in my place? Think you could handle it any better? Actually, the only reason I eventually sobered up was that I ran out of alcohol. I woke up late Thursday morning with a pounding head and a swirling gut. I stumbled my way to the bathroom of the small house I had been renting with my girlfriend. She was gone now, just like everyone else. As I leaned over the toilet, voiding out my insides, I felt the reality of my situation creeping back in. Not long after, the shake started up. I flushed and hurried to the fridge. I needed a drink before I broke down again. I flung open the fridge door and felt my stomach drop. There was nothing left, no beer, no wine, nothing. I screamed in frustration as I slammed the door closed. God damn it. I tried to compose myself. I really did. Instead, I broke down again. When I was done with my momentary pity party, I grudgingly decided it was time for a supply run. We needed groceries badly before all of this, and along with the drinking, I had done quite a bit of emotional eating as well. Half a bag of stale Fritos, the rest of mine, and Jens' leftovers from the pizza place, and several bowls of cereal with questionable milk. So, I threw on my bathrobe, climbed into my truck, and headed to the store. My local grocery store would have beer and frozen food, but if I went ahead and drove 15 minutes to the next town over, they had an actual liquor department in their grocery store. That seemed well worth the drive to me. On the way, I cycled through radio stations, hoping and praying to hear a voice, even if it was just some pre-recorded message. But there was nothing on, nothing but dead air. I couldn't stand the silence, so I reached under my seat. After a bit of fumbling, I found my CD case and slid in one of the discs. It was an old mix I had made in high school. Metallica, Radiohead, Black Sabbath, and Nirvana. I swerved and weaved between stalled cars on the highway as creep blared through my truck speakers, loud enough to wake the dead. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. About 10 minutes later, I pulled into the parking lot of the big grocery store. Not worrying about the shopping cart crunching under my wheels, I backed right up the door of the store and stepped out onto the empty lot. I noticed a small dog a few yards away, sniffing at a dropped purse. It was a corgi, and it wore a leash the same shade of pink as the purse. I started to walk on into the store, but hesitated. If the dog ran off with the leash still on, it could get tangled up or trapped. Maybe if it was friendly, I'd keep it. After all, I was alone now, and dogs are supposed to be man's best friend, right? I stepped over to the dog, which eyed me curiously. "It's okay, girl. I'm gonna take care of you now." But as I got closer, the dog lunged back, snarling and barking. What the hell? I thought. I had never had a dog respond to me like that. I love dogs, and they usually love me. Maybe she was just freaked out from what was happening. I knew I was, "Easy, girl, I'm not going to hurt you," I said softly as I crouched down, trying to seem unthreatening. The dog barked and snarled as it backed further away, but couldn't go anywhere very fast. The leash was actually fixed to the heavy purse. As quick as I could, I reached down and grabbed the purse, pulling the dog towards me and into my arms. It snarled and snapped, trying to bite my face, but I managed to get the collar unfastened. I dropped the dog and stepped back, watching as it took off running and yipping in fear. Poor thing, I thought. It must be terrified. I watched it continue running as fast as its little legs could carry it, until it disappeared around a corner. With that over, I turned and headed inside the store. I was glad the power was still on as I made my way down the aisles. I hadn't even thought about bringing a flashlight. That thought led me to wondering, how long would the power stay on? With no one to maintenance the grid, it would only last a couple days, right? Maybe a week tops. I decided that however long it was on, I was going to enjoy drinking my beer cold. While I could, I was halfway through a six-pack when I made it to the exit, my cart filled with booze, Hot Pockets, and various other unhealthy items. I even had a carton of cigarettes. I don't even smoke, but I figured now was probably one of the best times to start. I was in the middle of wondering if and where I could find some drugs. I had never done any drugs before, aside from a little pot when I was younger, when my eyes caught something across the street. It was a mall, the same mall where I had met Jen. Jen, I felt a hitch in my chest as the pain started up again. I bit down on it and downed another beer. I looked at the mall again, shaking thoughts of her from my mind. The food court had the best soft pretzels in the state. I sniffed and pulled a bottle of Kentucky bourbon from my cart and headed across the street. Walking through an empty mall in the middle of the day is unsettling. After raiding the food court for now very hard pretzels, I stumbled aimlessly from store to store. I rode the escalators up and down over and over again. There was evidence that people were here. I saw plates of food unfinished on the food court tables, bags of purchased items littered all around the floor, and a few abandoned strollers. What happened? I mean, really, what the actual fuck happened to everyone? And why hadn't it happened to me? I looked up at the roof skylights. Why? I shouted. What did I do? I screamed to a God who had clearly abandoned me. I was answered only by my own voice, echoing through the empty mall. About half of the bottle was gone when I stumbled into movie theater. I found myself wishing I knew how to run a projector. There were a few movies on here I wanted to see, but at the time I was too far gone to even attempt figuring it out. Instead, I filled a bucket of popcorn and made my way into one of the auditoriums. I plopped down into what I thought was the best seat in the house, absolute center of the theater. I stared up at the blank silver screen, thinking back to all the movies I had seen here, with my dad, with my friends, with Jen. Tears burned in my eyes as I ate my stale popcorn and drank my bourbon. Sometime later I woke up and didn't immediately know where I was. The dim theater lighting seemed strange and alien. I climbed to my feet and let the empty bottle I was holding clatter to the floor. Suddenly I remembered. It all came back in a flash. I was alone, and just like that, I felt the shakes coming on again. I left the mall and made my way back to the grocery store. The frozen food I had collected was now a soggy mess. I wondered how long I was gone. Checking the clock on my truck dash, I realized it was quite a while. It was 9:26 a.m. I had left my house around noon. Yesterday, I shook my head and started to chastise myself for my degenerate behavior, then shrugged it off. Who the fuck would care now anyway? There was no one left to judge me. After another round of grocery shopping, more booze and Hot Pockets, I climbed back into my truck and headed for home. When by some miracle I made it back home in one piece and unloaded my supplies, I remembered something. The dog from the grocery store, and the way it had been stuck on the leash. I knew that some of my neighbors had dogs and cats, and I still kind of wanted a pet. At least then I wouldn't be completely alone. I made my way around the neighborhood, checking the houses for trapped pets. Some were already gone from when I had broken in before, but the others, they reacted to me exactly like the dog from the store. Mrs. Smith's Chihuahua was terrified of me. The Ryan's golden retriever snarled at me like it wanted to bite my head off. I couldn't understand it. Those dogs had always been so friendly. I had brought Chuo home to Mrs. Smith after he ran off dozens of times, and the Ryans always walked Goldie around without a leash. Their behavior, even under the circumstances, just made no sense, unless the lyrics to the song I had been listening to on the way to the store came back into my mind. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't belong here. They knew. The animals, they knew. Something is wrong with me. I don't belong here. Not anymore. I finished making my way around the neighborhood, propping doors open. The animals could come and go as they pleased. I wouldn't bother them. Finally, I made it back to my house and stepped inside. With nothing else to do, I threw a hot pocket into the microwave and started in on the next case of beer. I hadn't realized that I left my front door wide open. Not until I heard the noise of something scuffling slowly across the floor. I felt a momentary spark of excitement. Thinking that just maybe one of the dogs had calmed down and sought me out, I stepped around the corner to the front door and froze. The blood in my veins turned to ice water. It was a man. He was bald, broad-shouldered, and wearing a dirty, rumpled gray suit. And he was standing on all fours, staring up at me like a deer in the headlights. I wanted to speak, to ask him who he was, or where he came from, or what happened to everyone else, or any of the dozens of other questions I'd had since this started. But I couldn't find my voice, and even if I could, I didn't want to. In that moment, I was more afraid of him than I was of being alone. We stood there staring at each other, neither of us daring to move. Then the microwave dinged, and the man went into a panic frenzy. He screamed in a deep, throaty howl as his face contorted in anger. I began to back away, but then he lunged at me, his fingers hooked and his teeth chattering. I screamed and fell back hard onto my ass. I scrabbled back out of his reach as he pounced at me again and again, but I couldn't get away. He grabbed me, slammed me back against the oven, causing a cast iron skillet that I had used and never washed to fall to the floor. I reached for the skillet with my right arm as I used my left to keep his gnashing teeth away from my throat. As I felt my fingers fumbling the handle of the skillet into my hand, my left arm erupted into a white-hot pain as he bit down on my forearm, shaking his head side to side like an animal. I swung the skillet with all of my strength, bashing in one side of his forehead. Blood spattered across the floor as he let go of me and whirled away trying to find his balance. I quickly stood and brandished the skillet in front of me like it was Excalibur. "Come on, motherfucker. You want some more?" I shouted, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. In truth, I was petrified. I felt like I was about to pass out. Luckily for me, he didn't want any more and quickly ran out the door, still on all fours. I ran over and slammed and locked the door, gasping for air. I watched him through the window as he made his way to the woods behind my house. The whole way, he kept on shooting angry and confused looks back at me. Later, as I sat on my bathroom floor, I examined the bite he had taken on my arm. The teeth went deep, and the bleeding hadn't yet stopped. There was about a quarter-sized chunk of my arm meat missing. I felt sick thinking about where it was now. I had a brief moment of concern about turning into whatever he was, but dismissed it. That shit only happens with zombies, right? He didn't seem like a zombie. Didn't really seem all that human anymore either. I thought about that as I disinfected and wrapped my arm with gauze and tape. There was something in his eyes, something primal, something feral. That's when it hit me. There was no humanity behind his eyes, no soul. They held intelligence, sure, but more like a savage and cunning intelligence, like a predator. He looked at me exactly like the animals did, with fear and confusion. I didn't drink any more that night. I went to my closet and pulled out my grandfather's hunting rifle, a lever-action 30-30. If he came back, I'd be ready. I'm not as alone here as I thought, and I don't belong here. Story 6. The No-No Man won't leave me alone, and now I'm starving to death. Have you ever heard of the No-No Man? If you have, it's already too late for you. There's no easy way to put this, but I am a 36-year-old morbidly obese white man. Have you seen Darren Aronofsky's The Whale? Well, I'm twice that man's weight in prosthetics. The only difference is that while Brendan Fraser gets to shed his prosthetic prison off after rap, my oceanic roles are as vast as they are inescapable. As you can imagine, it was a bit of a problem. I never wanted to be so fat. I was always a real butterball. Growing up, my mom even used to call me the Great English Ham. Being a tubster is cute when you're a kid, but it got out of control fast. The phenomenon of lifelong eating disorder stemming from parental abuse is well documented, and unfortunately I was no outlier. You see, my father would kick the ever-loving shit out of me and my mom daily. And while my mom found her peace in ketamine, I found mine in the cookie jar. Fast forward to 3 months ago. I'm doing my thing. I sell subprime mortgages to illegal immigrants who make lumbo money off construction gigs. It's not a job Christ would do, but it pays the bills better than washing hooker feet or whatever. It started off like any other day at the office. I reached down between my legs to fish out a good humor strawberry shortcake bar from the mini fridge wedged under my desk, only to be met with violent resistance. Whap! A sharp and assertive slap intercepted my searching hand from its creamy treasure. I let out a frustrated "what the fuck?" catching wayward glances from Steven, our resident Microsoft Excel specialist. But when I looked up to see who had so rudely gotten in the way of me and my good humor strawberry shortcake bar, I found myself face to face with something totally inhuman. Not to say he wasn't human-like. His rib bones jutted from under his latex-tight jaundiced skin. The stomach vacuum sealed inward, revealing the corrugated outline of a large intestine. And the shoulders were hunched so he looked like a very tall S. He was so naked I screamed. I looked up at his face, having half a mind to give him a piece of my mind, when I saw his awful, inhuman face. It was human-like because it had eyes, a nose, and a mouth, but they were all totally inhuman. The eyes were blackened by the shadow of his big, furrowing brow, his massive cheeks forcing his eyes into beautiful half-moons. The nose was so long that I hesitated to look straight at it, for fear of my eyes getting stuck cross eyes. And the mouth, well, that horrible puffy mouth, puckered into a great big frown that stretched past his chin and jutted from the face about, let's say 3 inches. Then, in a booming voice louder than anything I'd ever heard in my whole fucking life, he said, "N-O, no, no, no." An emaciated finger wagged pendulously from his stone knuckles. I couldn't believe it. No, I refused to believe this was happening to me. I quickly rubbed my little eyes as if to say, please let this all be a bad dream. But it wasn't. This was dead real. I looked over at Stephen with eyes full of desperation and hopeless confusion. "Are you seeing this, man?" I whimpered. "What?" He replied normally. "You don't see this?" I said, his dumbness almost driving me to madness. I reached down again for my pink, juicy, good humor strawberry shortcake bar, and the man slapped me even harder than he had before. "Ah, fuck. That fucking sucks." I screamed as my knuckles began to bleed. A deafening "oh, no, no, N-O," shaking the very foundation my reality is built upon. "What?" Stupid Stephen murmured hesitantly. "Try it. Grab the good humor strawberry shortcake bar. You'll see." I barked like a rabid dog. "For real? You never let me touch your snacks. You always bark at me when I ask you for one of your good humor strawberry shortcake bars." Stupid Stephen shat out of his bitch mouth. "Do it." I howled. My bottom lip jutted out, and I bounced up and down on my tiny office swivel chair, flapping my arms like a temperamental bird. Now, 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 quickly. So, Stephen came over to my desk with a quizzical look. He opened the fridge and grabbed a good humor strawberry shortcake bar. "Now, give it to me, Stephen. Give it to me and I'll give you a raise and maybe Microsoft Word as well." I quibbled. "Oh, cool. Sure," he said. But before Stephen could hand me the sweet treat my heart oh so desired, the big S-shaped man took his evil hands and tore Stephen limb from limb. His shoulder came out with a stomach-spinning POP. He cracked Stephen's leg bones, and the man slurped up the gore like a well-seasoned Baltimorean working his way around some crab legs. The man tore through Stephen's flesh as easily as my child hands used to tear through microwave frosting. He would scoop heaping piles of flesh and viscera into his elongated throat, stuffing it far beyond its flesh storage capacity, and then turn to me, chewing wide and slow, making sure I could see every gruesome detail of what was once a perfectly productive co-worker slide pathetically down his neck chute. Stephen screamed and screamed, but I covered my ears because the screaming sound hurt. When I uncovered them, what was left of Stephen was soaked into the brand new carpet I had installed not even 2 weeks ago. I fell to my knees and cried. That's when I learned that when the no-no man says no, you listen. It's been 3 months now. I lay fetal, my emaciated body forming a bumpy on the novelty faux tiger skin rug, sprawled out on the floor of my cigar lounge. My tongue hangs out, licking at the floor, every lick eliciting a swift slap on the taste buds, like a S-shaped cat pawing at a tiny, helpless bug. No, 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 he coos. He won't let me eat, not even a lick of dust. And while I look better than I ever have, so like Christian Bale and Machinist, I'm dying really hard. My hunger is consuming me the way I wish I could consume some food right now. I'm using the last of my strength to type this out. I needed to warn the other morbidly obese white men of this world of a fate worse than death. Well, I am dying, but I'm sure my death is hurting more than most other people's deaths. So long and farewell. And remember, if the no-no man comes, well, let's just hope he doesn't. Story 7. I went to a faith healer 30 years ago. I've been paying for it ever since. I've been a counselor for 26 years. One of the first things I learned is that people trust counselors even when we don't deserve it. They trust us with everything, their experiences, emotions past, pain, fears, hopes. Above all, people trust us with their stories. Everyone loves stories. Don't get me wrong. Everyone doesn't love books. Everyone doesn't love movies. Everyone doesn't love TV or plays or operas or musicals. But everyone loves the heart of the book and the movie and the TV show and theater. That heart is a story. We love stories because they always have meaning. People crave meaning. We need it. If we don't have it, we create it. The easiest things to create meaning with, of, and for ourselves are stories. One of my greatest privileges is helping people weave their experiences, emotions, past, pain, and hopes into something with meaning. To see that their lives have a purpose. That there's always a reason. That there's a point. I've been trying to find the point of what I'm about to share for a very long time. No matter what I do, I can't. When I was 7, my parents disowned my big brother Matt. Overnight, he vanished from my home, my family, and my life. From everything but my memory. I wasn't even allowed to say his name. My parents didn't tell me why. They didn't need to. I trusted them. I trusted that there was purpose in everything they did. I trusted that there was a reason I no longer had a brother. I trusted that there was a point. Let's skip ahead 8 years. A whole lifetime for me. In that lifetime, I've gained 3 little brothers and baby sister who Matt never even met. I've lived more years without Matt than with him. It's been so long, I barely think about him. One night before dinner, the phone rings. We aren't the kind of family that answers the phone during meal times, but I'm expecting a call from a girl I like. Besides, dinner hasn't officially started, so I dodge my dad and answer. Hello, I say. Is this Mark? It's not the girl from church. It's someone who sounds nervous, tired, and horrifically sad. That sadness terrifies me. I want to hang up. I almost do. Instead, I say, who's this? My name is Jacob. I'm Matt's friend. Do you remember Matt? Of course. I say, even though that's mostly a lie now. Good. That's good. I'm calling on his behalf. Why isn't he calling himself? I asked, even though I knew he wasn't allowed to. Because he's sick. I don't want to scare you, but he's very sick. Are your parents there? I glance at my dad. There's no way I look at him for more than a second, but it feels like a year. Yeah. Can I talk to them? Please. The grief in that voice pours through the phone and soaks me where I stand. I don't want to talk to that voice. I don't want my dad to talk to it, either. I hand him the phone anyway, and over the course of the next 2 minutes, maybe less, I watched my dad drown. Matt was dying, technically of pneumonia, non-technically of AIDS. He'd lived on the streets for a few years after we abandoned him. He pulled himself out of homelessness and gotten his life on track, just in time to get that diagnosis. By then, the disease was too advanced to treat, and now he was dying. He wasn't even in a hospital. He was in a hospice house because he had a couple of weeks to live if he was lucky, a couple of days if he wasn't. That's why Jacob called. Because Matt wanted to see us before he died. That was his final wish. To see the family who had cast him out. We flew out that night, and on the way to the airport, my sobbing father finally revealed why we disowned him. Because he'd caught Matt with a boyfriend. That was it. That was the reason. That was the point of getting rid of their son. To punish him for being gay. I don't think I had one coherent thought between that disclosure and the moment we pulled up to the hospice house. It was a Catholic hospice. Most of the nurses were nuns, and the administrator was a priest who directed us to the waiting room. We sat there for a long time, just another sad family in a small sea of sad families. The man across from us looked saddest of all, sadder than anyone I've ever seen. So sad I wanted to hug him. Finally, the nurse called us back. She made us wait in the hall while she gave us the most depressing rundown I've ever heard. He's out of it because of painkillers. He won't be awake for long. His skin integrity is failing, so he's bleeding a lot, so you're not allowed to touch him. Even if he asks, even if he cries, you're not allowed to touch him. When we finally got to see him, my mom burst into tears, and I came close. He looked like a nightmare. Sallow, emaciated, covered in raw bruises and bandages. White bandages stained with red blood, like a visual encapsulation corruption. He scared me so badly until he smiled. His smile was beyond beautiful. It was radiant, absolutely radiant, with love. Love for us, his abandoners, his abusers, his betrayers. After everything we did to him and everything we stole from him, he still somehow loved us enough to smile like that. The nurse looked at Matt with that same radiant love. Every time she glanced at my parents, though, her expression turned to pure loathing. I was glad. Loathing is what we deserved, not love. What followed was kind of a blur. I wish it wasn't, but it is. Lots of smiling, more crying, endless apologies. I felt so apart from it all, like I was on the outside looking in, but beyond that, like it wasn't real at all, like it wasn't really happening, wasn't part of my real life, wasn't part of my story. Matt got tired really fast, just like the nurse warned us, before he faded. He called for the priest who asked us all to bow our heads and led us in prayer. It was all supposed to be beautiful and meaningful, but it wasn't. It had no meaning at all. None. That's why none of this. Not my family's change of heart. Not our reunion. Not even my brother dying before my eyes. Felt real to me. Why I felt like it wasn't part of my life or my story. Because it had no point. There we were, crying and loving and being a family. If we were doing it now, we could have been doing it all along. So why didn't we? Why did we abandon Matt in the first place? Why did we vanish him? Why did we make sure we lost him? What had been the point? All those years, that entire lifetime, were gone. Matt's life was over. The lost time could never be found. Our relationship could never be repaired. Our abandonment could be undone or overcome or fixed. And there had never even been a point. I stood up mid-prayer and stumbled out of Matt's room, down the long liminal hall, and into the reception room. I collapsed into the same chair, the one across from the saddest man I'd ever seen. And just like that, I knew, "Are you Matt's boyfriend?" I blurted. He nodded. "Mark." His voice was husky and small, and even sadder than I remembered. "Yeah." He put on a smile that was somehow even sadder than his voice. "It's good to meet you." I tried to smile back, but my face fell apart instead. "Did your parents kick you out too?" He shook his head. "My parents and I are close." Did they like Matt?" I started to cry. "So did he." He reached over and took my hands. "Very much," he said. "They come visit every day." I'm not sure how it happened or what I was thinking, but I tightened my hands around his, stood up, and dragged him into Matt's room. When they saw each other, the love between them was palpable. Radiance that was more than radiance. I took comfort in that. I took comfort in the nurse, too. The one that looked at my parents with cold hatred, but shone with light when she looked at Matt. Compared to her, my parents looked dull and dead. I knew I did, too. I didn't want that. Not then, not now, not ever. I wanted to be bright. I wanted to be radiant. To shine on everyone I met until they felt loved. I've been trying to do that ever since. Let's skip forward again. My relationship with my parents never recovered. I tried and they tried, but trying wasn't enough. In fact, trying just made everything worse. And it didn't take long to accept there was no point trying anymore. When I graduated, I ran away. Then I ran some more, then ran even farther than that. I ran until I found something that felt like it had a point. That turned out to be the hospice house where Matt died. I'd never come across anything like it. It was run by a Catholic order. Whatever you're thinking about the Catholic Church is valid. Trust me, I know. But none of it applied to that hospice. It was everything the church is supposed to be. I loved it. From there, I got involved in the parish. The priest, an elderly Filipino named Tadeo, welcomed me with open arms and put me straight to work, which quickly put me in touch with dozens of other charity providers in the city. That was when everything fell into place. When believed there was meaning. When I finally felt like I'd found the point. I dived in deep. Before I knew it, I was spending every waking hour helping whoever I could. It was bad enough that Father Tadeo cut me off for a while. Rest, he said. You need to rest. I didn't want to rest. I wanted to double down. So I did. I spent my days off cooking meals in my tiny kitchen and buying supplies for care packages that I distributed myself. I even installed my own phone line and gave a number to everyone I met so that they could reach me if they needed help. In hindsight, my behavior was pathological and it wasn't selfless. It was penance for Matt. If I helped enough people, then maybe one day the good would outweigh what I'd done to my brother. So I did all the good I could, and that was my life. Shelter work, street outreach, meals on wheels, soup kitchens, back alleys and highway overpasses, abandoned buildings and the dark corners of city parks. Wherever forgotten people go, I went. They didn't want me there at first. Earning their trust was a long road. People who have been kicked aside and forgotten don't trust easily. They can't afford to. I knew that. So I worked triple time to prove myself trustworthy. I finally made headway with an old guy named Caleb. For a couple months, I met him every other day with food and cigarettes while I showed my services. Connections to charities, shelters, food banks, free clinics, transportation, the hot meals I cooked myself. He barely spoke. He just smiled and smoked and made jokes. I didn't mind. I knew this was his way of vetting me. And one afternoon he smacked my back and said, "You need to meet my friend Cherise." Who's Cherise? The one you need. She's the girl everybody trusts. If she trusts you, everyone else will too. Don't you actually call her Cherise, though. If you call her anything but Reese, she'll kick your ass to Arkansas. You don't want Reese to kick your ass anywhere, especially Arkansas. He led me to a daisy-choked overpass beneath a bridge that spanned the river gorge. There, chilling out with a book and a Ziploc bag of cookies, was Reese. Reese was something. She was over 6 feet tall and built like an MMA fighter with a temper to match. But she had the saddest eyes, like a scared kid staring out of a grown-up face. And behind those eyes and under that temper was the most selfless person I've ever met. Caleb hadn't lied. Everyone on the streets trusted Reese. She was almost a celebrity. It didn't matter where we went. All she had to do was don her trademark white sweatshirt and sit on a bench or a sidewalk somewhere, and people would start creeping up, people who were homeless or mentally ill or suffering addiction, or who'd had to run away from home just to survive. People who'd been taught in the cruelest ways to trust no one. And Reese, this glowering, foul-mouthed giant who could smash your head in with one wrong move, had earned the trust of every last one of them. And no wonder. She was great with everyone, but kids especially. When you're forced to live the lives these kids had, you learn to recognize safety. That's why they trusted Reese. They knew she was safe. They knew she'd protect them. They knew she'd love them. That's actually the first time I came to terms with my own hubris. The savior complex is a charity worker's curse, and by God, I was cursed. Until I met Reese. Part of me believed I was the only man ever to shine the light of compassion and kindness upon the poor homeless folk. But here was Reese, who'd been spreading light, so bright it burned through everything. Reese, who'd been giving everything she had to these kids for years. Reese loved all of them, but her favorite was CJ. CJ was 15. She wore sandals year-round to show off her neon green home pedicure. She had crazy curly hair that she kept tied up in the highest, tightest bun. Her laugh was the best thing in the world, goofy and hiccupy, and so loud it drew stares. She had an ancient dog named Eeyore, who walked with a limp and had cataracts. CJ loved Eeyore. She loved Eeyore the way God loves his children. CJ also had a terrible temper, severe mental instability, and really bad addiction trouble. By the time I met her, she was horrifically thin. Her little body reminded me of Matt, withered and terribly old, but far too young at the same time. She was alive despite it, though, wildly, wonderfully alive. I didn't know the story behind her friendship with Reese. I just know it involved Reese shooting a pimp. That was enough for me. Anyway, CJ worshiped Reese. Once she got to know me, she tagged along with us on our charity routes just to be near Reese. Reese was her best friend, her protector, her savior, right up until CJ got swept up in Reverend Moore's congregation. But I'll get to that. Once Reese vouched for me, the people who trusted her learned to trust me too. The more they trusted me, the more Reese trusted me. It was a positive feedback loop that fostered genuine friendship. As that friendship blossomed, she began to confide in me. Everything she told me was tragic, made all the more so by the matter-of-fact way she recited it all. It started bad, got worse, then much worse, then unimaginably bad, before it ended with the disclosure that she was dying. Stomach cancer, metastasized to her lungs and liver. 26 years old and dying of cancer. Talk about pointlessness. Reese actually did talk about pointlessness a lot. She was consumed with the concept of it. Just like me, she said, "I'm pointless even more often than I thought it." "That's not true," I said one day. "You've got CJ." "For now," she answered. "But that won't last. I love that girl. I'd die for her. I'd kill for her again. But someday she's going to end up right where she was before, and I can't do anything about it. She's still a point. She's a point about as much as Chelly's a point." "Who's Chelly?" "My girlfriend." I won't lie, that stung. That stung bad. I didn't know you had a girlfriend. The way she treats me, I barely know I have a girlfriend, either. See? No point. Well, except maybe these. She pulled a ragged plastic baggie out of her backpack. It was filled with something crumbled and pale. "What the hell are those?" "Cookies. She makes them for me every week." "Want one?" "No." "Good call." She popped one into her mouth. "I mean it, Reese. Your life's not pointless." "It is," she said thickly. "What about me and all the good work we do?" "The work is your point," she said. "Not mine." "You could make it your point." For some reason, this made her laugh. That made me feel really good. Right up until her laugh turned into a coughing fit. You would never even know Reese was sick if it weren't for her cough. It was terrible, this thick, phlegmy, bloody cough. When she had a bad fit, it got everywhere and stained her sweatshirt, red eating up the white. But that was the only sign. Otherwise, she looked and acted so healthy it was easy to forget she was sick. Lots of people did. I definitely did. That's why I roped her into all my charity routes. And we were a great team. Everything I once did alone, we now did together. Shelter work, street outreach, meals on wheels, soup kitchens. Wherever forgotten people go, we went. And we weren't the only ones. We were working side by side with people from all kinds of programs. We're talking state, county, city, big churches, little churches, and everything between and beyond. A lot of them truly wanted to help, but not all of them. You have to understand that marginalized people are targets. Socially, politically, religiously, economically, even personally, everyone wants something from the marginalized individual. even if that something is as simple as go away. Thankfully, none of the outreach places wanted that. Unfortunately, a lot of them wanted much more. Charity is the perfect cheap costume for a hungry wolf, and there were a lot of wolves running around back then. The weirdest of these wolves was a faith healer called Reverend Moore. Reverend Moore was an old televangelist who stayed and set up shop after stopping in during the election season. He'd been in town for about a year at that point and worked out a community building funded by a local philanthropist. He aimed his ministry at marginalized people. It was a startlingly big ministry. In addition to his church, he ran a halfway house that was so successful that every participant went on to bigger and better things. Some got jobs at his church. A few got shipped off to his headquarters back east. Some integrated into the community. And a bizarrely high number left the area for better opportunities. The city government was thrilled. Any solution to visible signs of homelessness and poverty was welcome, and Reverend Moore was clearly very good at erasing visible signs. But I was suspicious. I'd never seen any program with a perfect cure rate for addiction and mental illness. So I was skeptical. Scared, too. Some of the people who entered his programs and moved on were people I knew, people I cared for, people I actually loved. To see them vanish in droves frightened me, but there was nothing to do. Politicians adored Reverend Moore. The homeowners cheered him on. Both political parties endorsed him, and the disadvantaged populations liked him, too. Even I couldn't find anything wrong with him. I mean, come on. He was running successful charities, productive treatment centers, a popular church, and a street-based ministry that helped people even Reese couldn't reach. He didn't even take anything from them. All his donations came from the wealthy. Unlike every other hardline preacher, Reverend Moore accepted no tithes, asked for no money, and in fact took nothing from any congregant who passed his donated threshold. I crossed that donated threshold myself several times, just to see what he was about. I never liked what I saw. The chapel was always full to bursting. The worshipers watched, enraptured, as the Reverend preached the strangest version of hellfire and salvation I've ever heard. Every few minutes, he'd call on someone from the audience, which was the most mismatched crowd you could imagine. Local celebrities and rich folks were rubbing shoulders with people society threw away. Animals wound through the crowd, too. Cats and dogs mostly, but chickens too, and goats, iguanas, parrots, even a pony sometimes. It was like someone had freed a petting zoo in the building. It took a couple of services for me to figure out that was because the Reverend offered healing services to animals as well as people. He wasn't even the healer. That honor went to a young woman named Rochelle. The congregation adored her almost as much as they adored him, and it was easy to see why. She was beautiful, exceptionally so, with long black hair and a face like a porcelain doll. During the services, she always wore a flowing white dress and a thick red blindfold. She was also the subject of the most impressive special effects I've ever seen in a church service. First, they did something with her blindfold that made it look like her eyes were shining through the fabric, like she had stars instead of eyes. On that enigmatic note, she flounced off, but she flounced right back in no time. I saw a lot of her over the next few weeks. She and Reese spent a lot of time with me, first on my volunteer routes, and later at my apartment. We got really close really fast. Or at least, I felt like I got really close to her really fast. One afternoon, that closeness reached critical mass. I kind of lost myself and kissed her. She kissed me back. Not for long, but long enough. About 5 seconds after she pulled away, Reese came in. "Isn't it time for you to skip off to church like a good girl?" she asked Chelly. "It is. See you soon." Chelly smiled her big, bright smile, then took off into the night. When she was gone, Reese said, "Mark, you and I need to talk." I blushed, but made my voice as hearty and carefree as possible. "About what?" "Chelly, I'm sorry," I said. "I don't care about that," she interrupted. "I'm actually kind of glad. It's good knowing someone will be here to take care of her when I'm gone." I couldn't quite meet her eyes. "Still, I'm sorry." "Yeah, whatever. Take a seat." I took a seat. "Now listen, someday, probably soon, based on tonight, very soon, Chelly's going to ask you to help me. I'll always help you, Reese. You know that." The problem is, nothing she asks will actually help me. She fixed me with a stare that bored through my very core. She's gonna ask you all kinds of shit. Some of it won't make sense, but some of it will. It doesn't matter. You have to tell her no. What exactly do you think she's gonna ask me? She settled back and bit into one of her cookies. I love Chelly, she said, more than I've ever loved anything. Even when she's being a bitch, Chelly makes me happy. And she's the only thing on earth that makes me feel safe. Like, my life has no point. Never has, never will. Chelly is what I have instead of a point. She's all I've got, and that's okay because she's a lot more than most people get. I know, I said, and so are you. She waved me off. Just remember that before you get mad about what I tell you next. I'll remember. She took another bite. Chelly isn't sane. She seems pretty sane to me. That's because she's hot, charming, and reads emotions like we read street signs. Think of it this way. She's wearing a sanity uniform, but it doesn't fit quite right, and it's cheap besides. Pay attention next time you talk to her. You'll see exactly what I mean. What about her isn't sane? For one thing, she thinks she's possessed. By what? A demon, dipshit. A demon named Star Eyes. That's why she's attached to Reverend Moore. He convinced her he can help her control it. And she cut off. And I prompted. She smiled. Now you're going to think I'm crazy. You probably are. I bet it's why the two of you are a match. Her face darkened. So abruptly I got chills. Sorry, I said. I was just... Don't worry. You didn't say anything wrong. I just hate that word. What match? Yeah, match. She popped another cookie into her mouth. All right, so years ago, Chelly accidentally did an exorcism on her mom. How did she do an accidental exorcism? That's exactly the question I wanted you to ask. Chelly's crazy and she's wrong about almost everything, but she's very special. Not just because she's pretty and charming and full of love for idiots like me and Dee, either. She's basically got magic powers. What kind of powers? She's a miracle worker. She heals people. So she's actually a faith healer? Like at Moore's church? No. Whatever Reverend Moore has her doing in that church is fake. Okay, but if she can heal people, then why would the church healing be fake? Because I've seen her heal people, and I know for a fact that it hurts her. What do you mean? Let's say you break your finger. I take you to Chelly and ask for help. She says, "Oh, of course I'll help you, Mark. You don't even have to ask. I'll do anything for you because I love you so much. Come here." She takes your broken finger, holds it for 10 seconds, and abracadabra, alakazam. It's fixed. But Chelly's finger is broken now. Or maybe it's her toe. Or her nose is bleeding. Or her left I can't see so well anymore. Do you understand? I think so, yeah. Okay, well, Chelly's mom was a basket case. The kind of lady who makes Chelly look sane. A doctor diagnosed her with some mental illness. When Chelly heard that, she decided to heal her, to fix her mom's sickness, even if it meant making herself sick. And that's exactly what happened. She fixed her mama, which broke her mind so badly. She convinced herself her mama wasn't sick at all, that her mom had a demon inside, and now that demon was inside Chelly instead. How do you know all this? I asked. Some of it she told me. Some of it I've seen. I've seen her fix people, Mark, and I've seen it hurt her. I've seen it nearly kill her. That's how I know that whatever she's doing for Reverend Moore is fake. I frowned. So she's really just with him because she thinks she's possessed? She heaved a sigh, then ate another cookie. Kind of. There's a little more to it. So basically, she thinks Reverend Moore can teach her how to use Star Eyes to cure my cancer. But he'll only teach her if she gives him something in return. She won't tell me what that is. But she might tell you when she comes to you for help. If she does, I said. If she does. And if she does, you tell her no. No matter what. I don't want help from her. I don't want help from fake demons or real ones. And I don't want help from Reverend Moore. That conversation should have done something to diminish my feelings for Chelly. But it just ramped them up. For her and for Reese. And in some ways, I didn't think Chelly was all that crazy. I actually understood where she was coming from. Don't get me wrong, magical thinking is bad. Delusional thinking is worse. Stress and trauma increase both, often to catastrophic levels. And Chelly and Reese were so in love. They loved with love that was more than love, with Reese's death imminent. It didn't surprise me that Chelly went off the deep end. If I was losing what they had, I'd go off the deep end too. That's why I was so shocked when Chelly broke it off. That's the first time I ever saw Reese cry. She cried until she coughed up blood, then coughed until her white sweatshirt was spattered with blood, and just kept on crying. I took her to my apartment and sat with her all night while she cried herself half to death. Up until that point, I hadn't seen much evidence of Reese's illness. I knew intellectually that she was terminal, but I couldn't reconcile it into reality because she always looked so healthy and strong. That changed when Chelly left. Without her, Reese faded fast. We're not talking months or even weeks. We're talking days. She went so fast, I was sure I'd wake up any day to find her dead. She refused to go to the hospital. She even refused to let me help her. She refused to do everything but fade. It was my worst nightmare come true, and I didn't know what to do. I was terrified, heartbroken, and above all jealous. It's sick, but true. I was jealous that I wasn't enough for Reese, that she didn't love me enough or even like me enough to consider, just for a second, that I could make her life worth living. And I guess she was right. I couldn't do that for her. Only Chelly could. But Chelly was gone. One morning, I stood in my bedroom doorway looking at Reese as she lay wheezing in my bed. She'd been coughing all night. Trickles of dried blood stained her face. She lost so much weight in such a short amount of time that she looked cadaverous. I knew that she was going to die, and out of nowhere, I thought of my brother Matt. I remembered the night in the hospice house, how the reality of his death finally brought my parents around to a semblance of humanity. Maybe the reality of Reese's death would bring Chelly around. So I swallowed my pride, and that Sunday, I struck out for Reverend Moore's church. I left an hour early because I hoped to talk to her before the service started. Even though I arrived early, the makeshift chapel was already bursting with people and animals. I scanned the crowd for Chelly, hoping against hope to see her, but she wasn't there. The vast majority of the worshippers around me were visibly homeless or struggling, and I recognized most of them. But here and there I saw well-dressed people too, stiff and out of place, grimacing whenever someone brushed against them. Before I could get too angry about it, the lights dimmed and the crowd fell silent as booming footsteps echoed across the stage. I saw his smile before I saw anything else, big and bright in the shadows, shining like a Cheshire cat from hell. Then I saw his eyes, dark as pits and indescribably cold. Those eyes found mine and his smile widened. I couldn't look away. I couldn't move at all. I couldn't even think. I was just a lamb frozen in fright before a hungry wolf. Finally, he raised his arms. Welcome. His voice boomed, rich and resonant and horribly comforting. Fear not. God is here and we will prove that tonight. The cheers that followed were deafening. I covered my ears as frightened animals went scurrying for cover. Then Chelly drifted onto the stage, wearing her white dress and red blindfold. Something about how the lights hit her turned her hair to dark fire and made it look like her eyes were shining through her blindfold, bright as tiny stars. You all know the drill, Reverend Moore intoned, and those who don't soon will. Now, who got first promise at our last service? A knot of people clustered around the stage. For a terrible instant, I thought they were going to stampede each other. They might have if one of those rich, well-dressed interlopers hadn't helped a teenage girl onto the stage. A girl with neon green pedicure, hair tied in a high bun, and an ancient dog in her arms. CJ and Eeyore the white face and cataracts. The Reverend made a joke I couldn't hear over the clamor of the crowd. As they roared with laughter, Chelly tugged his sleeve. He looked down at her, smile faltering briefly, then leaned down. She whispered in his ear. His smile faltered again. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled something out, and slid it over her finger. A ring that looked for all the world like it was made of light. Then Chelly placed both her hands on Eeyore. As I watched, light appeared. A narrow column of eerie, living light twined along her fingers. But it was different. At all the other services I'd seen, light rose off the body and formed a ring. This time, the ring of light broke apart, drifting down from Chelly's hand and raining down on Eeyore. When the last spark faded, Eeyore looked up, tail thumping. His face wasn't white anymore, and his cataract were gone. When he jumped, yipping happily, the congregation went feral. They went even more feral when Reverend Moore started inviting worshippers on stage. Chelly laid hands on them one by one. Every time, light rose from their bodies like steam and coalesced into rings that Reverend Moore blessed before tossing away. But why? If a ring of light had visibly healed Eeyore, then the light was the source of the healing. So why was he pulling light out of people instead of putting it in? And why didn't anyone seem to notice? Reverend Moore must have called 50 people to that stage, maybe more. Enough that I lost count. Enough that even I got swept away in the wild joy of the congregation. It felt like I was in a dream, like nothing was real and never had been. Finally, he announced, "We are nearly at our end. We have time for a final supplicant before first promise. Who shall it be?" The worshippers went insane. Dogs howled, birds screeched, people roared and cheered and screamed. The chapel transformed into a living mural of sweat-drenched bodies and foul smells, of shining faces and madly rolling eyes as everyone clamored for Reverend Moore's attention. His smile spread as his eyes swept the crowd and caught mine. Somehow that smile got even bigger, inhumanly big, like a crocodile or a shark or a starving wolf. He pointed at me. Every head turned, eyes glittering like dull stones at the bottom of a river. Then they reached out, nearly as one, and swept me forward like a human current as terror tore through me. And just like that, I was on stage. Story 8. My high school crush works as a dog psychic, and she found something strange. Have you ever heard someone's voice you recognize call into a podcast? Once, while sitting in traffic listening to one of my favorite comedians' podcasts, my high school crush called in. Her voice, raspy and sweet, brought me back to high school. Jade is unforgettable because she didn't forget me on the first day of high school. Coming in halfway through the year, my new school assigned me a buddy. My buddy wasn't interested in sitting with me at lunch. Guess who was? Jade. Maybe the star-shaped brown birthmark plastered on her face made her understand what it was like to be an outcast. That beauty mark on her face could never stop me from having a 4-year-long secret crush on her. Chasing her affection was a constant subplot in my high school story. Sprinting between classes to find her and dancing over the line between friendship and flirtation in cherished hallway moments were my daily quests. Our classmates predicted we'd end up dating. Rumors would come to me that she liked me. Jade heard the same rumors. But someone liking me that much seemed impossible. No leaps of faith for me to ask her out. But if you don't leap, you'll drown. Jade's voice drowned my hope when she told me someone asked her to the homecoming dance freshman year. It took until senior year prom for our romance to meet a climax. What a night we had. Jade's voice was scratchy and deep, a baritone for a woman. She was mocked for in high school, but also had a do-gooder level of innocence. Even as a grown man, sweating in a suit in his car without air conditioning in the LA sun and sitting in 5 o'clock traffic, Jade's voice had me floating away, smiling and dreaming of better days. My world had a breeze. For once, I enjoyed traffic because it allowed me to enjoy my old friend. I'll change everyone's names to respect her. This was the voice message she left seeking the comedian's advice. So, I've been doing bookkeeping for a local psychic here. It's just me and the psychic. We're the only employees. She sat me down the other day and told me business hasn't been great, but pet psychics have been really big lately. So she's thinking of bringing one on, which is just people who do readings on pets. I said, okay, that sounds cool. Then she offered me that position. I do not possess psychic ability. She basically told me she wanted to lie to these people and tell them that I can communicate with their dead animals, but I would be paid double what I earn and obviously less work. So right now, I'm doubting everything she's ever told me. The professional funny men burst into laughter. Wait. One said, let's call him Davy. You were working for a psychic and you thought this was real? The two laughed at this for a while. Usually the laugh of the main host, something between a great uncle's gaffe and a wheezy supervillain. Gets me to laugh, but Jade's predicament made me feel bad for her. The comedians cooked Jade to a crisp with jokes that normally don't bother me, but again, this was about Jade. With 1 minute left, they got to the actual advice portion. You have the opportunity to learn the truth, Davy said and coughed away a laugh. Like, it seems like being honest is something that matters to you. So you thought you were helping people. Maybe dig into that. You could do bookkeeping for something that's truthful. Yes, you've been lied to, and it does suck, but the fact that you care about lying to people is unique and says a lot about your character. You don't want to go down this path of lying to yourself. Nah, the other comedian said, let's call him Danny. What do you mean, nah? Forget all that. Just lie to yourself, Danny said. Danny, don't be evil, but lie to yourself. Only accept money from Nepo babies and rich idiots. The funny men laughed, but Davy forced himself to become serious. Yeah, Davy said, look, we're lying to ourselves right now. It's not going to be a bunch of Nepo babies and rich people. It's going to be a bunch of poor people who always fall for scams. Look, you care about truth. That's rare. Go and seek truth. Well, those are your options. Lie to yourself and lie to people and make great money. Or be honest and be a broke loser, Danny said, and the call moved on. The episode was a month old. Jade had heard it by now. My phone was in my hand before I knew it, searching through her LinkedIn to find out what she chose. A horn blared at me because I had to go a couple of inches forward. Buddy, we're stuck here. I'm not moving for the delusion of getting to our destination sooner. Huh, I guess he was lying to himself as well. Anyway, nothing on LinkedIn about any job. Next, I checked Facebook. The guy blared his horn again. This time I ignored it because her Facebook showed where she worked, Madam Z's readings, with the guy behind me going ballistic. I made my appointment. The drive made me realize how much I missed Jade. Although I didn't have a pet alive or dead that I wanted to talk to, I lied on the application form. Didn't want to is maybe a stretch. Afraid to is more like it. I had one pet, and it died in 24 hours, so I never had the heart to get another. It was a frog I found and stuffed in this cheap plastic container with air holes at the top. It probably felt like prison for it. How unfair was that? You're living your nice little frog life. Then some kid enslaves you. Anyway, I named it well. Starfire from Teen Titans, my first crush. As a kid, I lived with my grandmother, my best friend, the sweetest woman. But she dropped out of middle school as a child. So she didn't know that not all frogs could breathe underwater 24/7. So, trying to help make Starfire comfortable, she accidentally drowned it by filling its water to the brim overnight. Starfire died, devastated. I vowed to never have a pet again. Thinking about that still made me sad. I never told anyone that story, and I didn't think telling Madam Z was the best time to share. So I made up a short story about a dog named Zippy. I keep my story with Starfire to myself and my long-deceased grandmother. Madam Z's reading sagged between an adult video store, didn't know they still had those, and an adult arcade, a place notorious for the poor and addicted to gamble away their money. Both places seem to take more care in their appearance than Madam Z. I imagine the type of person who would go to all three in one day. Walking in, I faced the entrepreneur herself. She stood behind a foldable table with a cash register on it. Behind her hung a poster board menu of various marijuana edibles. So I guess they doubled as a dispensary. Mr. Adam, nice to meet you, the psychic said and shook my hand. Have you seen the movie Holes? If so, you've heard the accent Madam Z was faking. Fake Romanian accent in stereotypical clothes. A baggy, colorful dress bouncing with every step. Hoop earrings swinging with each dramatic gesture, and a head wrap close to slipping off at all times. You as well, I said. Come, let's begin. With no sign of Jade, I had to make a move. Hey, sorry if this is awkward, but and I don't want to change anyone's schedule. I can come another day. But, can I see the other girl? What other girl? Oh, woman. Or, if they're going by that, I don't know. Mr. Adam. I'm the only psychic that works here. Oh, but I thought, maybe you are seeing into my future, Mr. Adam. Maybe you have the sight. We are hiring more psychics if you're interested. Jesus, lady, you never stop recruiting, huh? No, I said, sorry, I just thought. Madam Z's thin. Cold hand grasped my face and pulled me close. She tapped her long acrylic nails on my face. What pretty eyes. Surely they see something missing. No, that's all the sight is. Seeing gaps in the world that others can't. What do you see missing, Mr. Adam? Just personal space, I said with squished chipmunk cheeks. Madam Z pulled away. No, Mr. Adam. I'm the only psychic that ever has or ever will work here. She led me to a room only a couple of steps wide with black walls and blacked out curtains, and a circular table covered in black cloth. Now, let's talk about your pet, Zippy. What a name. A husky puppy scurried from under the table and through the other door. So quickly, I only saw its tail. Oh, is that your pet? No, I own her. Just a puppy. Some clients prefer to have one in attendance, but I sense you won't be needing her. Right, Mr. Adam? Yeah, sure, I guess not. Madam Z made some fake conversation with Zippy, and everyone got what they wanted, I guess. I got to see that Jade didn't take the job. Madam Z got paid, and I figured Jade, wherever she was, got what she wanted as well. On my way out the front door, the same puppy scratched at the door like it wanted to leave. It barked incessantly, making a scene. It scratched the door and pushed it, making the bells on the door sing. It was blocking my exit, and I didn't want the dog to escape. So I got on one knee and called for it. Hey girl, come here girl, I said, and the dog turned to me. Once it saw me, it dropped its mouth in surprised silence. Something I had never seen a dog, much less a husky, do. We stared at each other, eerily. The husky had a brown patch on the side of its face, almost identical to Jade's. My face crunched. I couldn't speak. Sound. Words. I couldn't make them. How do you say what you're thinking when I'm thinking this and sound sane? My heart hammered, then slowed, then trickled. The chime of the door stopped. The gentle hum of the husky's breathing was the only noise. But why did the dog look like Jade? Why did this happen? What is this? What? I said to the dog as if it could answer. Wait, no, wait. Silent. Frozen, we watched one another. A single tear plopped down the dog's face. Jade, come. Ms. Z commanded the dog, and with a pitiful whimper, the husky dragged itself to her. What? I stuttered out. What's her name? You said Jade? You should be able to leave now, Adam. Madam Z. Who does your books? Madam Z did not answer me. The beast looked back at me, mouth dropped, tongue hanging and swinging like a noose on a chill Sunday morning. But in that sweet, deep voice that could be Jade's, the husky spoke. Starfire said she does not forgive you. The words chill me to my core. There was no way on earth she should know about that. I pushed my way out of the door and ran for at least 3 blocks until I was comfortable enough to stop and call an Uber. I haven't gone back there since. I won't go back there. The comedians were wrong about there only being 2 options: lying to yourself or finding out the truth. Jade did try to lie to herself, but unfortunately, she found a much stranger truth. Truth mankind was never supposed to know. I like to lie to myself as well, because I'm never going back there. Story 9. My grief counseling group is stealing the memory of my brother from me. I'm typing this in the dark. My hands won't stop shaking. I know this is going to sound insane, but I swear I'm not paranoid. Please just listen. I wasn't going to post again. Not because I didn't want to, but because I hoped the first session was just a weird coincidence. After my younger brother Eli died in a car accident, my parents forced me into grief counseling. I expected stale coffee and awkward silences. Instead, strangers described things about Eli that no one else could have known. A green hoodie with a torn elbow pulled from the wreckage, orange popsicles he called sun sticks, and All Apologies by Nirvana, the song he used to play on repeat. They spoke as if they were talking about their own dead brothers. I panicked and deleted my post a few hours later, convinced that it was my brain trying to find patterns in my grief when there were none. Just before I took it down, though, I added something, a memory Eli never had. I made it up to prove I wasn't losing my mind, to prove there was still one memory of my brother that belonged only to me. I've been back to the group several times since then. Most of those sessions were uneventful. At least, nothing I could pin down as sinister. But I went back tonight, and I didn't think it was about grief anymore. I got there early, hoping to get ahead of the grief spiraling in my brain. Jean's gray-streaked bob stayed perfectly still as she watched me enter from her seat in the middle of the room, her notebook resting in her lap. "Good to see you again, Lucas." I didn't smile back, just gave a quick nod and avoided her sharp, green eyes. I sat in the same uncomfortable plastic chair as last time as I watched Mark, Greg, Lily, and Jonah, and another person I hadn't seen before shuffle in and take their seats. I tried to remember what was said about Eli's popsicle obsession, but it kept slipping away. Had I mentioned the hoodie? I didn't think so. I'd done my best to tell myself that I was just suffering from a hyperactive imagination, because after all, there was comfort in the panic, right? My eyes landed on the rabbit-shaped coffee stain on the floor, darker now, like something was pushing up from beneath the tile. I blinked, but it stayed. A jagged crack ran through its liquid features like a scar. I rubbed my eyes. The line had vanished, but the rabbit was back. Some things leave their mark, don't they? I heard Jean's voice, but I never saw her lips move. It was as if her voice was inside my head. That was when my ears picked up on something in the distance, a soft, off-key humming. The opening chords of All Apologies drifted through the room slowly, almost methodically. It was quiet enough for me to think that maybe I was imagining it, but it was there, and the humming was growing louder behind me. I turned my head slowly, my heartbeat rivaling the sound of the music. I noticed that Jonah was sitting in his chair, rocking slightly from side to side. His chapped lips were barely parted, and his eyes were half shut behind his square-framed glasses, like he was halfway between sleep and trance. But it was unmistakable. The melody was coming from him. I leaned forward in my chair, slightly. "Hey, you okay?" His eyes opened sharply, as if he had just woken up to a morning alarm. He gave a light chuckle before smiling faintly. "Why so jumpy, Rabbit?" I felt my blood turn to ice. I hadn't told anybody that nickname. Not one time. How did he know? "What did you just call me?" His brow furrowed. "I didn't say anything, man. You all right?" I shook my head and dropped the conversation with Jonah. I knew what I had heard. Everyone else sat still, left hands curled around their paper cups, elbows bent in eerie symmetry. It felt rehearsed, like a ritual they practiced. I didn't feel scared exactly, just disconnected. My body was in the room, but my mind was elsewhere entirely. I hadn't even said that nickname aloud since Eli died. That was his name for me. Something only he ever called me, because I would jump at the sound of anything. But now, others knew it. How? I am losing my mind. I thought to myself as I twiddled my fingers, waiting for the session to begin. Jean's smile tightened like something crawled behind her teeth. "No, you're not, dear." Had I spoken aloud and didn't realize? I blinked in confusion, and was met a look from Jean that suggested that I had been staring for too long. "Thanks." I responded briefly, as I did my best to calm my rattled self. Eventually, Jean asked us to once again share a memory, and this time, Lillian volunteered to go first. Her fingers danced over the leather bracelet on her left wrist in tight, practiced loops. He dotted his eyes with tiny bubble circles. My stomach lurched. Eli used to do that. His school assignments always appeared vandalized by balloons. Jean nodded slowly. "That's a beautiful memory, Lillian. Thank you for sharing. That's yours now." Why did she say it like that? Like she was giving it away? There was no time to dwell on that, as Greg went next. His knuckles were red from being rubbed raw, a habit he didn't seem aware of. He avoided spaghetti at all costs because he thought the sauce smelled like pennies. When it was my turn, I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, not even a whisper. I frantically searched my brain for something, anything about Eli that hadn't already been said. The harder I tried to remember, the faster it all evaporated, like breath on glass. I could remember his face, but when I reached for the little things like his laugh or his habits, they slipped through my fingers. Come back to me, I grunted, dismissing my turn so I could ponder everything further. I received a stern look from Jean as she reluctantly made the new person introduce himself. He was pale, lanky, and nervous, with sandy hair sticking up at the crown of his head. "I'm Shane," he spoke softly. "My brother, Ben, he was hit by a drunk driver a few years ago." The silence sat for so long I wasn't sure he was going to speak again, until he finally did. "We used to build these massive Lego castles together. He'd always insist on putting the flag on the top, because he said it wasn't a real fortress without the flag." "You don't know him. Stop pretending you do." The words ripped out of me before I realized I had sat up straighter in my chair. My throat burned with shame, but nobody looked surprised. "Lucas," no speaking out of turn. Jean tilted her head. "You don't want to lose him again, do you, Rabbit?" "What did you just say?" My tone now turning combative. I was telling Mark to go ahead. "That's definitely not what you said." I grumbled with clenched fists, earning glares from the others. Mark leaned forward in his seat, his eyes a little watery as he recounted his memory. He had this real wide gap between his front teeth. I thought he looked like a rabbit because of it. My eyes widened as my head snapped toward the coffee stain on the floor, the one that resembled a rabbit, except it wasn't a rabbit anymore. It was a devilish grin with two wide, stained teeth shimmering like dampened ink across the tile. I watched as the smile stretched and widened, its proportions growing with every second before it disappeared in the blink of an eye. I shivered in my chair as I clutched myself tightly, the room seemingly dropping in temperature as I listened to Jonah speak. That dinosaur shirt, you remember the one? Yellow, ragged thing with the little hole under the armpit? He wouldn't take it off. He wore it everywhere he could. "Stop it." I spoke through gritted teeth. They didn't listen. One by one, they spoke Eli into the room, in fragments of hobbies, phrases, and inside jokes, each detail carved into me like glass under the skin. Then Lillian said something that made me shudder. He used to say clouds were made of cotton candy, and dead dreams every time we drove past the old park. The words fell from her mouth like they'd always belonged to her. But that was mine. That was the one thing Eli never said. I felt sick. The world began to spin and tilt around me. I reached into my backpack for my water, and my fingers brushed fabric. Confused, I pulled it from my backpack. It was Eli's hoodie. It was torn at the elbow. The fabric was damp, faintly smelling of gasoline and scorched plastic. Someone had folded it neatly into my backpack. The dampness seeped into my palm as if it had been waiting for me in the wreck this whole time. Inside the collar. To Rabbit, you'll always be my player too. I remember Eli writing this on the inside of a birthday card. He had given me once. This was after we had spent hours, days, and weeks grinding different video games together. That was our memory. No one else knew that, right? I glanced at Jean, half expecting her to react. Instead, she was watching me, like she'd been waiting to see my face crumple at the sight of that ratty hoodie. She didn't even blink as I stood up in anger. "These aren't your memories," I declared, louder than I meant to. "You're not talking about your brothers. You're talking about mine." The room stood still. The only sound I could hear was my heartbeat thudding in my chest. But then, Jean's expression shifted to reveal a smile that was wrong in every possible way. "Lucas, I know this is hard for you, but don't interrupt the process." Mark looked up at me with a slow, deliberate frown. "Why are you so scared, Rabbit? You've always been here." Lillian chimed in, her eyes looking like they were going to protrude from their sockets. The color drained from my face as words failed me. They smiled in unison. Not real smiles, but ones carved into their faces like wax figures left too long in the sun. I took a step back, and that's when the lights began to flicker. Once, twice, until complete darkness. I could only see their silhouettes faintly sitting in their chairs, like chess pieces that had never moved. I went to leave when I heard the humming begin. It started out low, but slowly crept to crescendo as the sound of static crackled to life somewhere behind me. The first dissonant chords of All Apologies leaked out like rock through the community center. It was so distorted and warbled that it sounded like something dying was dragging itself across the room. The voices started again, except they weren't speaking anymore. They were mimicking and echoing Eli's laugh, his voice is humming. One by one, I listened to his words, leaving their mouths in the pitch black, like they were chewing them up and spitting them back at me. I sat there trying to picture Eli's face again, but for a moment, all I could see was a hoodie. What kind of brother forgets that? Greg's head twitched in violent spasms, his neck bending at a sharp, almost impossible angle as he whispered, "Sun Sticks. You remember Sun Sticks." Jonah's smile stretched almost past his nose, his eyes two flat pits of shadow. He said clouds were made of candy and dead dreams. I tripped backward over my chair, landing hard with a thud. The coffee stain shimmered like pond water, rippling under the flickering emergency light. It was grinning, and I watched in horror as its teeth grew huge, and the stain seemingly took a life of its own. The melody of the song looped repeatedly, bent and broken, until it sounded like screeches of agony in reverse. "Player 2, Lillian whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "We saved the castle together. Remember?" I heard joints cracking like tree branches in quick succession as something started crawling across the floor slowly. Bones scraped across the tile as a labored wee stick with phlegm came closer to where I stood. I turned to run, but it grabbed my ankle, its grip firm but slippery like a hand covered in oil. "I've fed on softer hearts than yours." Jean's voice echoed in my thoughts as I kicked hard and stumbled to my feet. I ran as fast as my feet could carry me until I slammed into the doorframe. I fumbled with the lock in a frantic struggle. Then lights exploded back on and the music stopped. The room had returned to normal. Everyone was still in place, like chess pieces that never moved. Jean sipped her coffee as she stared at the terrified expression on my face. I didn't say goodbye. With my heart still racing, I grabbed my backpack and ran the whole way home without looking back once. My mom asked about the session, but I didn't dare tell her what I saw, not even a fraction of it. I couldn't even really put into words what I experienced. All I told her was that it was fine, and that I walked home, because I needed the fresh air from how heavy it got today. I went upstairs to my room and closed the door, hopelessly gaslighting myself into thinking that a thin piece of what could keep the horrors out. All I could think about were those dying lights, the way their faces shifted, and a name I hadn't heard in months being spoken again. I dumped my backpack onto bed, but the hoodie was gone. I swore I had it. Hadn't I taken it out? Then I saw it, folded neatly at the foot of my bed. I knew I hadn't brought it home. I would have remembered. I curled up on the bed, wiping at tears I didn't remember shedding. The grief was still there, but I felt hollow, like my body was going through the motions without me. All I kept repeating in my head was, he called me Rabbit. I don't know how long I sat there in uninterrupted silence, but the sound of my phone lowly buzzing in my pocket snapped me out of my thoughts. I didn't recognize the number and just let it go to voicemail. If it is important, they will leave one. But the number kept calling me, no matter how many times I silenced or blocked it. In a moment that I would come to regret, I answered the phone on the 7th try. First came the static, gnawing through the speaker angrily, then the warped twang of All Apologies. Every note nauseatingly dragged out as if it were being played from a melted cassette tape. It sounded more like a funeral than a song. I pressed the phone harder to my ear before I realized my hands were slick with sweat. Underneath the layers of distortion, words manifested themselves. "You should have deleted me, Rabbit," said a voice that almost sounded like Eli. I whispered his name before the line clicked dead. "No, no, 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 no." I repeated as I felt the phone drop from my hand to the bedroom floor. I knelt to pick up the phone, but my hand brushed something else. There, on the floor beside my bed, was a popsicle stick. Sun Stick, written in messy orange marker. It was unmistakably Eli's handwriting. I didn't know if I was shaking from fear or from a kind of cold that creeps inside when nothing makes sense anymore. I crawled under my bed and pulled out an old box I had tucked away. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Inside were pictures of crayon monsters with jagged teeth and drawing of our Lego fortress. After a couple moments of quick searching through the contents of bittersweet nostalgia, I found the picture I was looking for. It was Eli. He was around 8 years old, and he was grinning wide with both front teeth missing, holding up a Lego castle with a tiny red flag. I could hear his voice clear as day in my head. It's not real without the flag. I felt myself choking back tears as I remembered begging him to play video games with me that day. If only he had stayed home, he would still be my player too. My chest stiffened with the memory of his laugh. That pure, careless joy. Maybe I'm the reason he's gone, and that's why I keep hearing him. I ran my thumb over the photo, over Eli's gap-toothed grin. Tears fell from my eyes. I shut the box. The memories felt radioactive. A dark thought crossed my mind. What if none of them are lying? What if they're not sharing stories? What if they're taking turns carving him out of me piece by piece? The sun sticks, the castle, the damn fake memory? It was the only explanation I had to rationalize the things I was seeing. But if they can steal something that was never real, what exactly does that make them? And worse, what does that make me? It's late at night. I haven't slept, and I don't think I honestly want to. I heard my mom answer the phone downstairs earlier. Jean called to make sure I had made it home safely. Something else was said, but Mom wouldn't tell me what. It'll all come back to you, is what she told me. All I could picture was Jean's smile, the one that always knew more than it said. I'm not just losing Eli, I'm losing myself. If anyone out there has ever heard of a grief group like this, or anything even remotely similar, I must know. I'm not sure if I should go back, but I feel like the only way I'll get answers is to keep going. I'm scared I'll forget his voice next. If I forget him completely, did I ever really have a brother at all? God, that sounds messed up, but I don't know how else to say it. I'll update whenever I go back again. I promise to stay safe and keep in touch with you all as much as I can. Story 10. My shadow started talking, and the things that it said chilled me to the bone. So, when did this start happening to you? The shrink asked, his eyes unfazed, staring, calculating, assessing. About 3 weeks ago, I answered. I didn't want to look him in the eye. I knew I'd get that look, feigned sympathy and fake understanding. I hated being here. I hated having to talk to this guy. And it was around this time that you said your shadow started talking to you. What did your shadow say? He didn't exactly talk like a regular person, just clipped phrases. Mostly, he said to run towards the light and to prepare. So the voice that you heard is a male voice? What else did he say? Did he tell you to cut your arm like that? He gestured at the bandage wound in my arm. Pain flared up again. No, I played around with a wild animal. Is all. Awfully big animal to leave a wound like that. All right, back to the talking shadow. You said something about preparation? What did your shadow tell you prepare? I don't know. He didn't say. I smelled suspicion in the air. It smelled like a dank old office line with old wooden furniture. Bitter pills that turn your head funny. New paper that gets scribbled on with unrecognizable handwriting. This shadow fellow's not very chatty, huh? He said. Then there was a bell. He picked up his phone. His brows squeezed into a frown. Seemed I was about to be released. Well, Victor, that is all the time that we have for today. But don't you worry about a thing, all right? We have had many schizophrenic patients, and you can absolutely live with it with the right medication. So, same time next week for your evaluation? Sure, I said, standing up, feeling relieved. I headed out of the building and stood on the sidewalk, breathing in the fresh air. I preferred the outside. I started walking home through the upscale area. I wanted to look at some of the apartments and houses and imagine what it'd be like to live there. I passed by ivory white buildings, skyscrapers, and tight apartments that were painted brick red. I passed by the apartment of my friend, Peter Collins. Or at least he was my friend, 3 weeks ago, until his shadow killed him and gave me this wound in my right arm. I knew it would sound crazy if I ever tell that story to anyone, but here I am, writing to you. I'm not crazy. The shadows in my town are starting to kill people. It all started 3 weeks ago. We were all excited to be able to have a group trip to a nearby water spring. Me, Peter Collins, Andy Brooks, and Tyler Morgan made up a group of friends. We were all roommates at the university, and we all liked the same things: horror movies, video games, rock music, and girls. It started out just a normal camping trip. We just swam in the spring and started barbecue and pitched our tent. Then it got dark, with the four of us around the fire. We started telling ghost stories, the sound of running water and crackling flame as our background. So this one is about a skinwalker, a creature who can open your skin and eat your inside and then take on your look. No one would know if it was the real you or the creature. The only sign is a wound to the forehead. Peter started. Sounds like bullshit to me, Tyler said. Duh, it's a story. And this one's an actual urban legend. Don't you hear? We've been getting a lot of reports about people turning up with forehead wounds in this city. Actual urban legend is an oxymoron. Can't be actual if it's a legend, Andy said, sipping his beer can. We were in the middle of our conversation when, suddenly, I started hearing words. Faint whispers at first, but then it built into a raspy voice. Run away, run to light. Did someone say something? I asked my friends. What do you mean? Peter asked back. Someone said something about running away to the light? Yeah, nice joke. What's next? A monster gonna jump out of the bush? He said and laughed. I gave an embarrassed laugh to save face. I thought I must have misheard. You often hear weird things in the wild. Run a light. The voice returned with greater volume this time. This time I was sure that I heard it. I looked to my friends for confirmation. Andy looked at me with incredulous eyes. I knew he heard it too. Anyone hungry for some roasted marshmallow? Peter asked and took out 3 metal skewers, held each skewer between the space of his finger, and roared, "I'm the Wolverine." He turned to Tyler. They both laughed. Just then, I caught something from the corner of my eye, a shimmer. It looked as if a black creature was writhing on the ground behind Peter. It took me a while to realize that it was a shadow. It was warping, moving somehow. He didn't see it, didn't have the chance to. His shadow rose up from the ground, formed a humanoid figure. The shadows of the skewers formed 3 claws on its left hand. Before we could react, the thing pierced Peter's chest, making a loud puncturing sound and splashing his blood on the ground. Peter only had enough time to turn around and look at the creature before dropping. I was the one sitting closest to Peter. The thing made towards me. I jumped and started to back up. Run, the light. The voice said again, clearer this time. The creature was rushing to me now. I looked to my left. Tyler and Andy were still frozen with fear. I knew I would not be able to outrun this thing, so I picked up a nearby burning branch and used it as a weapon. The creature paused. Then it started for Andy, who was closest to me. My fight or flight instinct kicked in. I swung the branch as hard as I could toward the creature. It dodged, and with one strike from its left claw, splintered the branch. The burning head of the branch dropped to the ground right next to Shadow, and the creature staggered backward as if afraid. "It's scared of fire," Andy screamed. I realized the same thing. But the creature was now closer to the fire than we were, and it realized that as well, because it immediately advanced to cut us off as the fire from the branch head died down. Tyler circled to the creature's right, and immediately jumped to block him. We outnumber him. Just spread out, and each of us get 1 branch, Tyler said. We did as he said, each of us spreading out to draw the creature away from the flame. Realizing the situation that it was in, the creature backed down from us and from the flame. "It's running away," I said to my friends. We advanced just as the creature backed down in a kind of weird lockstep. Finally, we were close enough to the flame. Each of us picked up a burning branch. My fear gradually gave way to justified anger. It was 3 on 1 now. I wanted to crush the thing's head. "We'll fucking kill you. Hear that, you son of a bitch?" Tyler roared, his branch raised high above his head. In the flickering light, he looked so grand and brave, like a giant. The light cast a large streak of his shadow on the ground. along with his branch, now magnified. Then the shadows started swirling. "Oh shit, run!" I screamed to my friends. They realized it just as quickly as I did and turned tail. I stole a look behind as I was running, and the sight froze my blood. The shadows were running for us. The new one was far larger and taller, and it held a giant club in its right hand. "Turn on light," the voice said again. I thought we all heard at that time, because Andy made a get-together motion with both his arms to me and Tyler. "I've got an idea," Andy said. "Buy me some time." "Are you crazy? How the fuck do we do that? They're gonna kill us in seconds." "Just trust me. Buy me some time." Me and Tyler stopped and faced the creatures. The shadows caught up to us. The big one immediately gunned for Tyler. It was unusually fast. The giant branch in its hand made loud thudding noise every time it struck the ground. The smaller one advanced slowly towards me, as if calculating its every move. We tried our best to draw out the fight, but Tyler ran out of breath trying to dodge the creature's strikes, and one of them hit him square in the torso, making a crushing sound. He held his side and dropped unconscious. At that moment, I lost focus. The smaller creature leaped forward and slashed at me, grazing my arm. The pain was immediate. I dropped my weapon and stumbled to the ground. The shadows were approaching us. I could almost feel the victory swagger in their walk. This was it. This was how we were going to die, killed by our shadows. Just then, I heard a roaring engine approaching. As it closed, a blinding beam of light flooded our entire area. The two creatures immediately started burning away. After a couple of seconds, they collapsed and dissipated. Andy got out of the car and ran to Tyler. I got up and we checked on him together. He was still alive, but there was a large and purple bruise on his side, and some ribs looked like they were pushed inward. We called the cops and left the headlights and the engine on until they arrived hours later. We wanted to go back for Peter, but we were so scared that we didn't dare leave the front of the headlights, our eyes fixed on our shadows. The cops did not believe our story, of course. I could hardly believe it myself. They called an ambulance for Tyler and Peter and searched around our campsite. No one besides Andy and me noticed that they cast no shadow even under strong headlights from the police and ambulance. The police escorted us to the station. They made us wait for 5 hours and interrogated us in different rooms. After a while, a thin and hawk-like man walked in. "Killian Kessler, detective. Here to ask you about the death of your supposed friend," he said. His voice was quick and brusque. "I already told you people about it. My friend's shadow rose up from the ground and killed him." "With what weapon?" "With these, a kind of long claws made from the shadow of the iron skewers that we use to roast marshmallows." "And you expect me to believe that?" "Well, it's the truth." I was getting angry. I wanted to check on my friends, not waste time with this asshole. "Know how much trouble you two are in? One count of homicide, and another count of first-degree assault with a blunt weapon. Where did you hide the weapons?" "They burned away with the shadows when we turned our headlights on." "Isn't that just so convenient? Know how many murder suspects we got that said the same shit you did? 6 just this week. Shadow people and weapons. Let me guess, you joined a cult and killing your friend was your initiation ritual. Is that it? Look, I don't know what to tell you. Just look at the ground around the camp. You're a detective, right? See the marks on the ground. No way we could make those with just the two of us." The detective looked at me, his eyes now 2 small slits in a gaunt face. I knew he didn't believe me, but I also guessed that he had no other explanation either, because after asking a couple of questions, he just left me in the room. Another officer entered and allowed me to leave with a warning that if any incriminating evidence turned up, I would be summed in a heartbeat. Looking around, I saw that Andy also got out and was waiting for me. "How's your wound?" he asked. "Bad. They disinfected it, but didn't give me anything for the pain. I was realizing the throbbing pain in my right arm. Heard anything about Pete and Tyler?" I asked him. "Pete's dead. Tyler is in intensive care," he said. His face darkened. "What do we do now?" "I'll do some digging. Meanwhile, I think you want to turn on all the lights in your apartment this evening. Prepare." A voice came out of nowhere. Just like before, I looked around. No one. Andy could hear it too because his eyes were darting around searching for the source. You know I didn't say it. I told him. Prepare, the voice repeated. I realized that it came from the shadow under my feet. Prepare? What do you mean by prepare? And why are you not rising from the ground and slitting my throat right now? Prepare light? I think it wants us to prepare for light sources, Andy said. Doesn't make sense. Why would it want to help us? I don't know right now. The detective told me there are some other cases like ours. I know someone inside. I'm going to ask them for the info about the cases. Try to keep safe, and in the meanwhile, I think we should buy some flashlights. I said goodbye to Andy and headed for Home Depot. I settled for 2 Streamlight ProTac and a Phoenix with a couple packs of CR123A batteries. The cashier gave me a strange look, but fortunately did not ask any question. I took the items home with me, occasionally looking at the ground. The experience had made me paranoid. I started to constantly look at the feet of passers-by, afraid that at any moment a shadow would spring up. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, we hadn't heard anything from the police, but the news was talking about an increase in violence in our city. I also got the feeling that I was followed everywhere I went, and I thought I saw the same car on the street opposite my apartment a couple of times. I started going to a shrink's office because my parents were raving nonstop about it. They thought I was actually going insane, but they didn't know. I passed by Peter's apartment. His funeral was last week. I didn't dare show up, and I imagine that Andy didn't either. We were still the only suspects in the case, and I didn't think his parents would take kindly to my recount of their son's shadow killing him. I muttered a few words of goodbye to my friend and carried on. My phone rang. It was Andy. This was the first time that he contacted me since the police station. We need to meet. I think I figured out something. Sure, man. Just tell me through the phone. Can't. Just meet me in my apartment. Right now? Right now. I didn't argue. From Peter's apartment, it would be about a 30-minute walk to Andy's. I kept my eyes trained to ground, afraid of any unusual motion. Suddenly, a shadow of a person appeared on the ground, staggered, and aimed at my direction. I could feel my heart rate doubling. But I looked up, and it was just a drunk who was pointing at someone behind me. I walked as quickly as I could, my hands holding on to the 2 ProTacs in my pocket. There, but jutting out. Another person would think that I was carrying weapons, and I received some frightened look from other people. They all avoided my direction and walked quickly past me. I arrived at Andy's and rang the bell. After a few clicks, the door opened. Behind it was Andy, only he was skinny and pale with 2 purple bags under his eyes. Jesus, what happened to you? Couldn't sleep. Come on in. Quickly. I think we're watched. His entire apartment was brightly lit. Every corridor, every room. He gestured for me to sit at his dining room table. Our shadows were printed on the wooden floor of his apartment. I looked around. There was a large industrial lamp with a long metal base that was shining directly on us. They're coming, Andy said, his 2 fingers pressing on both sides of his temples. Ooh, the shadows. I have read reports. There were 7 cases of murder, same as us. Suspects all reported shadowy people rising from the ground. 21 more since then. Shit, are you sure those are all shadows? Certain. No killing weapons were found. All reported seeing writhing shadows. Some escaped, some were burned away. We need to prepare. Well, I've got these. I took out my ProTacs. Want one? I asked. I have my own, but at this point our talk was interrupted. There was a knocking at the door. Andy moved to open it, but he only had enough time to unlock before the door was kicked in. It was Kessler and another police officer. Looks like we caught you red-handed. Boys. Exchanging weapons, huh? Maybe a few tips on how to conceal them from police? He said. He was smiling now, his eyes lit up like a predator. You got it all wrong. We just want to... I started. We'll see for ourselves what you are up to. Hands against the wall. While Kessler searched me and Andy, his associate looked around the apartment. Why is it so goddamn bright in here? He looked at a switch near the wall and flicked it. No, not that one, Andy screamed. Immediately, 2 of the brightest lights above went out. The room became only half lit. Our collective shadows formed an overlapping black mass on the ground. The light stands formed straight sticks. Then the shadows started swirling. "Look on the ground," I shouted. The shadow was rising now. From the amalgamation of our bodies, a hideous torso with 4 pairs of legs rose up. An arm of the officer overlapped with Andy's, and the shadow formed a big arm with 2 forearms on the left. On the right, Kessler's coat cast a large shadow, and the arm that emerged was also large, twice as large as that of a normal person, and it was holding the shadows of the lamp base. Kessler and the officer fired at the creature, loud bangs and a burning smell filling the entire room. But the bullets did nothing. Andy and I got free and used our flashlights on the shadow. It immediately started to burn away. Andy made for the light switch. Just then, its right arm used the lamp-based shadow as a blade and swung. It sliced off Andy's arm in a single strike. He dropped to the ground, his scream reverberating through the entire room. The flashlight in his arm rolled away. The creature swung for the second time, and Andy's torso was cut into 2 pieces. His blood splashed onto my face, leaving a metallic smell. I couldn't believe what was happening. "Motherfucker, I'll fucking kill you." I bellowed and trained my flashlight on the creature, wishing with every fiber of my being that the light would kill the creature. It burned away slowly, but the light from the flashlight was not strong enough, and it held out its left arm to cover itself. It was moving towards me. "The flashlight, get it!" I screamed at the officer. He dove for it as the creature was fixed on me. Then he turned it on and aimed it at the creature. It was visibly burning now. But before the officer could back up to a safe distance, the shadow leaped.